Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and I'll ask for a roll call by our Madam Clerk.
Ms. Hodges?
Here.
Mr. Mills?
Here.
Mr. Oden?
Here.
Ms. Spurgeon?
Here.
Mr. Kleindienst?
Here, and for the record, Dana, it's nice to see you at this table again. Feel all... Thank you for coming down. Please all rise for the flag salute. And Dana, I'll ask you to lead us in our pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, with so much going on in the world, I'll ask for a brief moment of silence. Thank you. Although the agenda states no presentations tonight, we are in fact honored by having a large delegation here from Korea, and we had notification come in after the posting of their arrival. It'd be appropriate that we have a proclamation. Dennis, perhaps you could bring some of the delegation forward and sit at the table, and we'll go ahead and read the proclamation, and then we'll take comments from the governor.
Okay. You need a mic.
Yeah. Let's roll some chairs up there for him. Yeah, there you go.
Great. Okay.
then-
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. My name is Dennis Bilodeau. I'm the president of the Orange County Water District, and I'm not here to take your water this evening. A couple months ago, I had the pleasure of traveling to South Korea, and one of the areas I visited was Gochang County. Gochang is known, it's primarily an agricultural county, and they produce 80% of the kimchi consumed in South Korea. So it's obviously a very important county to South Korea. And another thing they're known for is they have natural sulfur hot springs, similar to Palm Springs and Desert Hot Springs. They decided to come to the United States to explore marketing and tourism opportunities and learn more about marketing and tourism. And one of the specific places they wanted to visit was Palm Springs, as it's known throughout Korea for its springs and its beauty. And so I have the pleasure of introducing to you Governor Tae-ho Kim, the governor of Gochang County. And this is Mr. Bae, his translator and escort. And I have a couple other people. I have Mr. Back, who is the division or the Ministry of Health minister for the county. I have Mr. Lee, who's the planning director of Gochang County.
Welcome.
I have Mr. Choi, who is the assistant to the governor here. And let's see.
Over here too, Dennis.
Okay, yes, and I have another Mr. Bae, and Mr. Bae is the tourism minister for Gochang County.
Very important.
And we have one other
business.
gentleman tonight. We have a Mr. Kim from Riverside, and Mr. Kim is hosting us for dinner this evening. Local Korean businessman, and he actually originates from Gochang County. So, either we could have the governor say a couple words, or if you'd like to proceed.
Let's have some comments. Please introduce Steve. Steve.
Oh,
Burnett.
and we also have Steve Spurnack. Steve Spurnack is assisting me in hosting the delegation this evening, and Steve's from Orange County, and he's currently helping the military museum in Orange County be established at the Tustin Marine Corps Air Station.
Outstanding. Governor, please.
예. 정말 우리 시장님과 또 시의원님 이 소중한 자리에서 먼저 인사하게 되고 만나게 돼서 무척 기쁘고 반갑습니다.
Thank you very much for a warm welcome, and thank you for showing your, valuable time with us.
시장님도 굉장히 잘생기신데 보니까 제가 오늘 오자마자 이 스파에 사우나를 하고 보니까 제 얼굴도 훨씬 오늘 잘생겨 보입니다. 제가 봐도.
As soon as I got here, I had a spa in my resort, and did not look better. Now I recognize why. Including mayor, all like city councilors are so looking good here.
정말로 제가 이렇게 아름다운 도시에 참 세계적인 휴양지에 이런 자리에서 특히 시장님과 의원님들 모시고 이런 인사를 하게 돼서 큰 영광이고 또 이런 기회를 저희들한테 이렇게 만들어 주신 바로 시장님과 여러분들에게 정말 감사의 말씀을 드리고 싶습니다.
This is my honor to be welcomed by all city councilors. This is such a beautiful city. This is a world-famous resort. I never forget it. I just visited this city.
우리 거창도 이제 그 온천과 또 우리 청정 지역으로서 우리 이 팜스프링 지역하고 상당히 그 일맥상통한 부분도 많은데 정말 우리 관광 분야에 큰 관심을 가지고 있고 저희들이 여기에 방문하면서 바로 첫 이미지가 바로 우리가 그 가고자 하는 그런 답을 준 도시인 것 같습니다.
Gyeongsang County, where I came from, has much similarity with the city of Palm Spring. We also started to develop our hot spring area. So I have much interested in how Palm Spring became such a famous city as a hot spring and resort.
비록 시작은 이렇게 첫 만남이지만 이제 이 만남이 서로 또 우리 군과 또 우리 팜스프링 시간의 소중한 또 관계가 되어서 앞으로 더더욱 발전되길 바라고 다시 한번 이런 기회를 주시고 환대해 주신 데서 감사를 드립니다.
I think this is just the beginning to establish the future relationship with the city of Palm Spring. Thank you very much for warm welcome again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
감사합니다.
Allow me to introduce our city council, please. The governor. I have to my right our mayor pro tem, Mr. Ron Oden, Councilman Chris Mills, Councilwoman Dana Hodges, and Councilwoman Jeannie Reller Spurgeon, all members of the city council. And this is our city manager, Mr. David Reddy, our city clerk, Trish Sanders, and our city attorney, Mr. David Alshire. And I have a quick proclamation I'd like to read and then present to the governor on behalf of the entire city of Palm Springs. I need to get one thing clear. Can you pronounce the name of the province?
Gyeongsang.
거창.
I think it sounds like a Guchang. Gyeongsang.
Kochang. I will try my best to make sure that's properly pronounced.
Because of like a spelling.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is a proclamation of the city of Palm Springs. And whereas County Governor Kim Tao-ho, magistrate of Gyeongsang County, accompanied by his distinguished delegation from Gyeongsang, is in Palm Springs for the purpose of researching cultural tourism and marketing natural hot springs facilities and facilitating transactions of import and export business between Gyeongsang County and American companies, and to involve and represent his region of the Republic of Korea to promote business between his county and the Coachella Valley. And whereas Gyeongsang is the educational, economic, and natural beauty center for 3 cities in the northwestern Gyeongsang province, and whereas Gyeongsang is known for its abundance of agricultural products such as grapes, watermelon, pumpkin, mushrooms, chestnut, pine nuts, and rice. Gyeongsang apples and strawberries are world famous for their sweetness, taste, and specific fragrance. The region's meat products include Korean beef and pork and are equally famous. In the highlands of Gyeongsang, carnations and chrysanthemums grow in abundance. And whereas Gyeongsang has 4 industrial complexes with many companies producing stone products with good color and great strength and gloss, which are highly sought after for their artistic beauty. And since ancient times, Gyeongsang has been renowned for its good water, supply systems, strong, hardworking, and sincere people. Now, therefore, I, William G. Kleindienst, Mayor of the City of Palm Springs, by the power vested in me, do hereby proclaim this day, June 11th, 2003, to be Gyeongsang County Delegation Day.
Thank you very much.
Governor Kim. Is your camera photographed? Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Council? We'll bring him over? Yeah. Yeah. Bring the governor to the ladies, please. Thank you very much. All right. Jeannie Rella Spurgeon.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you.
Dana Hunt. Very good. Very good. Gentlemen, thank you so very much.
Will.
이건 그 우리 거창에서 직접 그 우리 인간 문화재가 만든 그 징인데 이 징의 의미는 이렇게 치면은 그 애군을 다 없애고 이렇게 복이 들어온다고 그런 이야기.
This is actually like a product made from like Gyeongsang County. This is a geo and gong. If you heat this gong, this is a, I mean the very special instrument, metal instrument made out of from the bronze. So if you heat this gong, just expelling all bad things from out of your town, city of Palm Springs.
Oh, we need
And
one of
this- You bring the good things and good love to this county. So this is a symbolize the good friendship between the Gyeongsang County and the city of Palm Springs.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Governor. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, safe trip home. And they're staying at the Spa Hotel. Go
All
figure.
right.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Round
you.
of applause for the governor. I'll put this in our trophy case. It's gone, we'll put it in a trophy case. Thank you. All right, at this point, we'll move right into the agenda. I'll turn to the city clerk for the report on the posting agenda, please. You're taking gavel on this issue.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the agenda you have before you was posted in accordance with the council procedures last Friday. I would ask that you please note on your adjourned agenda that the resolution numbered 3D should have a hearing date for August the 6th of 2003. That would be August the 6th. 3D.
August 6th it is for 3D. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Housing Authority, the Industrial Development Authority, the Financing Authority, the Community Redevelopment Agency have no business scheduled tonight. We'll now turn to public comments on any matters within the jurisdiction. Anyone wishing to address the council, please come forward at this time. Very good. Seeing no one, will close public. Okay. You know, can I ask a favor? We have public comments scheduled on 2 other meeting sessions. We'd like to try to get to these issues as quickly as possible for the benefit of Ms. Hodges. Is that possible?
Yeah, it's real brief.
Go.
30 seconds. Yes, and it's wonderful to see you. And it's wonderful to see you here. I just wanted to go over something really quick, and I'm Nancy Stewart. I am the current vice chairman of the Tram Board, and I just wanted to let you know that we have a special event coming up on July 4th weekend, and it's to celebrate our military. We're having a Military Appreciation Days, July 4th through the 6th. All military personnel will be admitted free with their photo ID, and their guests will be receiving a 20% discount on the regular tram ride. This is being publicized, and I'll leave this with Tricia, publicized at our local bases, as well as down in San Diego and throughout Orange County. So I just want to let you know we are very excited about this and to honor our fellow military folks. And also this goes for people who are retired military as well. They just need to show their ID. So I just want to let you know about that coming up. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to address the council during public comments? Very good. Seeing no one. We have a consent calendar. In both cases, they deal with Mountain Gate. Mr. Mills and I will have conflicts of interest, so we'll be abstaining and stepping out of chamber and giving the gavel to Mr. Oden. Mr. Oden. I'm abstaining because I have business transactions with Mountain Gate's owners.
I'm abstaining for business reasons as well.
Thank you. We will continue with the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that you would like a staff report on or to have pulled?
No, I'll move the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Hodges and seconded by Councilmember Reller Spurgeon. Roll call.
Ms. Hodges?
Aye.
Ms. Roller Spurgeon?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor?
Aye. Folks, they passed unanimously, 3 and 2 abstentions. We'll move, anything on the extended consent agenda?
There are none, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, there are no public hearings, and we will forego council comments on this one for the special legislative action. Item number 3, Assessment District 161, Mountain Gate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is regarding resolution of intention. And for the staff report, I would ask Mr. David Barakian, our city engineer and public works director, and Tom Kennard, the finance director, to join us at the table, along with city attorney, Mr. Alshire. They will have the report, and I believe that Mr. Barakian will lead off. David, thank you.
Thank you, and welcome.
Thank you, Council, Mayor and Council. This item number 3 before you is basically follows the same track map that the 2 track maps that you just approved, which means the gift is starting to work already. This item is approval of 3 resolutions with regard to a proposed assessment district to finance the public improvements on the Mountain Gate tract. Previously, council had authorized the hiring of an assessment engineer to prepare an assessment report. The items before you tonight are the approval of the first resolution, which is a resolution of intention. The second resolution is approving the boundary of the proposed assessment district, and the final resolution is approving the preliminary engineering report and setting the public hearing date for, as the city clerk mentioned, August the 6th. There's one item.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I think the date we could set it actually would be the June 30th meeting.
July. The July 30th.
Thank you.
That has to be, we have to give 45 days notice of the hearing, and I know that the council, well, if the council's having a meeting on August 6th, that would be fine, but I've kind of heard that potentially we will be dark in August, and there is a 5th Wednesday, and July 30th would work for the hearing date on this. So it would be up to the council. On the 3rd resolution, currently in your packet, it says that the date is the 23rd day of July. That date was picked when we thought this was going to be approved in May. So we need to correct that. It could be either the 30th or August 6th, depending upon which date you intend to meet.
Okay, so would you want the motion to
When you
reflect
act on the resolution, if you could let us know which of those dates. We obviously, normally the 30th would have been just a study session, but we could make it an adjourned meeting for that purpose. If you're not going to meet on August 6th, it would be a hardship on the developer to have to wait till September. So we would urge, if you're not going to have the meeting on the 6th, that we move that up to July 30th.
Okay. Anything else on the staff report?
The only other thing is that there's on page 3A4, the estimates that are shown there, those were like the original estimates, and there have been some changes. The overall total assessment amount is nearly the same.
Equal on all parcels, you're saying?
Well, if you look at the lower left-hand box, those are no longer individual assessments. There's one assessment for Ventana and one assessment for El Dorado, equal on all the lots.
Oh, okay.
And
because that was going to be my question. I didn't understand how the larger ones would have lower assessments, but if they're standardized, then it's okay.
yes, and there were some. It says bond term is 30 years. I think that's been changed to 25. But the total assessment is I just wanted to point that out too. This was an original sheet that's been revised over the time. That concludes my report. Mr. Merle Schultz from Webb Engineering, the assessment engineer, is in the audience should you have any detailed questions on the engineer's report.
Thank you for the staff report. Council?
Not unless you have any questions.
Then the chair will entertain a motion.
Sure. I'll move the resolutions with the July 30th date. And I'll second it.
Okay, it's moved by Councilmember Roller Spurgeon and second by Councilmember Hodges. Roll call?
And this would be for all three resolutions reflecting the July 3rd date for your hearing.
Yes.
Ms. Hodges?
Aye.
Ms. Rose Spurgeon?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor?
Aye. That concludes item number 3. Any additional legislative items?
There are none, sir.
Added starters?
There are none.
Okay, then we will move to adjourn the adjourned meeting, and we will move to the special. Do you want to? I was going to ask just one question. Okay. Okay. We will begin our special meeting as soon as the mayor and Councilmember Mills return. Why don't we start with the posting of the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this agenda that you had before you was posted in accordance with Brown Act provisions for special call meetings.
Okay, then we will proceed with the roll call, and Mr. Mayor, pass the gavel.
Where are you? Did you take the roll call? Okay. Well, then I'll turn to public comments on matters within. You haven't done the roll call? No. Let's call for the roll.
Ms. Hodges?
Here.
Mr. Mills?
Here.
Mr. Oden?
Here.
Ms. Rose Spurgeon?
Here.
Mr. Kleindienst?
Here. We'll ask for the report on the posting agenda. I did so. Thank you. Public comments on matters listed on the agenda. Anyone wishing to address the items on this agenda, please come forward at this time. Very good. Seeing no one, we'll close public comments. We'll turn to item 1, which is the final map for 31006. I'll ask for Mr. Reddy for his staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would ask our Director of Public of Engineering, Mr. Bracken, to come forward and give the report here. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, David.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This item is simply the approval of a final map 31006. The reason it's brought forward today is some developer deadlines have been requested to be met. The final map is in conformance with the tentative map. All conditions have been met, and staff recommends approval of the final map.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Bracken. Council, questions on staff's report?
No, Mr. Mayor, I will move the resolution.
Second.
Motion for approval by Mr. Oden and second by Ms. Rella Spurgeon. Any additional comments or questions? See none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It's 5-0. It's unanimous. It's nice to have a 5-0 vote again. Let's turn to item 2, which is the Palm Springs Swim Center. Mr. Reddy, your staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This is one of the reasons why we had asked for this special meeting. The bids on the swim center came in just recently, and as you recall, we bifurcated the swim center and the shower area from the skate park, and we rebid the swim center, and as a result of that, these bids are in, and we did receive a lower bid on the filtration equipment, so this is a very good and positive thing, and it is before you this evening for your approval, and we strongly recommend your positive nod. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
And by the
Reddy.
way, Mr. Mikesville is here to answer any specific questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, questions or comments? It's the council's pleasure, then.
Move the minute order.
Second.
Motion for approval by Ms. Relis Spurgeon and second by Mr. Mills. Any additional comments or questions? I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Ms. Hodges?
Aye.
Mr. Mills?
Aye.
Mr. Oden?
Aye.
Ms. Relis Spurgeon?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor?
Aye, it's 5-0, again deemed unanimous. We'll now turn to our study session. Yeah, all right, with that, we'll take a brief recess, and then we'll convene in our study session mode. Thank you. Call the meeting back to order. We'll go into closed session at this time, and I'll ask for our, go into study session. I'll ask for our closed session report from our city attorney, Mr. David Alshire.
Yes, council and agents met in closed session. Of the items on the list, real property negotiations, we gave a status report on negotiations with Ruth Markowitz on the Plaza Theater. No action was taken. Real property negotiations with John Westman concerning the Brussels building, gave a status report. No action was taken. The items listed with Happy Valley LLC and with Jerry Johnson were not discussed. The item involving Jack Casper, Garden Springs Apartments, we gave a status report. No action was taken. The Vista Sunrise, McCormick, Salazar, we gave a status report. No action was taken. The items under for real property with the city, real property negotiations with Desert Water Agency, the 3 items listed for the parking structure with Talala Service and Marcus, and also the real property negotiations with the Nichols Family Trust. We gave status reports on each of those matters. No action was taken. Concerning the litigation matter, People versus Wilkinson was not discussed. The litigation matter, Andrews versus Fargus, we gave a status report. No action was taken. Exposure litigation, we discussed one item. No action was taken. We did not discuss the initiation of litigation, and we discussed the negotiations with the maps and general units. No action was taken. There was one added item to the agenda involving real property negotiations with Mark Bragg concerning Shadow Rock. We gave a status report. No action was taken.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Alshire. We'll now turn to public comments on matters within the jurisdiction of all the entities. Anyone wishing to address the council, please come forward at this time. Good evening. If you'll push the button, make sure the green light is on, draw the mic close. We'll give you 3 minutes, and welcome.
Thank you. I'm speaking to you tonight in support of Palm Springs tourism.
Charlie, give me your name.
Charlie Robles. Tourism, as everyone knows, is our #1 industry in the city and responsible for over 27% of the taxes that the city receives. A few months ago, I was asked by the mayor and city manager to sit on a committee that was reviewing the SMG contract for the convention center, excuse me, along with tourism. One important issue we discovered was that the SMG corporate office was not, in our eyes, giving very much support or guidance to our center. Now, keep in mind that SMG is one of the leaders in convention center management in the United States. SMG also manages our Bureau of Tourism as part of the contract with Palm Springs. Palm Springs, by the way, is the only Bureau of Tourism that they manage. How can we expect them to give guidance and support to our Bureau when they have no experience in managing a Bureau of Tourism? Linda Fort and her staff work to promote this city, and I certainly appreciate their efforts. Unfortunately, when someone disagrees with anything that they do, the Bureau receives the brunt of their criticism. I have had the privilege of being a member of the Advisory Board for Tourism for 2 years now, and while it is made up of a variety of members of the Palm Springs tourism community, it lacks the authority to lend any fiscal direction to the Bureau. If the city is going to be spending as much money as it does, and we all know it takes money to make money, it needs to be fiscally responsible. For this reason, and to assist tourism to do an even better job to bring tourists into our beautiful city, I ask that you consider Mr. Oden's request for an advisory board appointed by this council to give direction and input to the Bureau of Tourism. Who better understands the needs of the industry but local industry leaders? Let this board shoulder the criticism and let the Bureau get on with promoting Palm Springs. Thank you for your time this evening and for your continued support of tourism.
Thank you, Charlie. Anyone else wishing to address the council during public comments?
Hi, my name is Casey Jones. Good evening. I'm with Townhouse Development, a management company that was formulated here in Palm Springs about 2.5 years ago. I too wanted to speak about this. I don't necessarily agree with all the points of my business partner who just spoke to, but I don't want to turn this into a finger-pointing match, but there's a couple of points I wanted to make. And actually, I've got something which I wanted to share with council. Should I give this to you? There you go. That's an example of an agenda, a suggested agenda that would be followed on a monthly basis with an advisory board. Right now, I think that everyone at this table, and quite frankly, many citizens and business owners in this community would be hard pressed to answer any of those questions or to speak about any of the items that are on that particular suggestion for an agenda. And I really think with 27% of our tax base coming from tourism, that everyone at this table needs to very clearly understand all the points that would come from a monthly meeting and an advisory board. I want to bring up, I want to make public and bring up a particular issue that will illustrate my feelings about our Bureau of Tourism, and that is, why would City Council and the City Manager allow funds from the tax base of the City of Palm Springs to promote businesses at the Gardens at El Paseo? Well, that's exactly what happened at Powwow, the major wholesale event in St. Louis a couple of weeks ago. I find that absolutely unacceptable. Now, that said, I know that Ms. Fort apologized for that, and it was an oversight on her part. Kudos to the Gardens at El Paseo for being that smart, but I really think that with an advisory board that this kind of thing would not happen. And in fact, I know that the advisory board that serves under Ms. Fort currently did not know, from talking to individual members on that board, did not know that this was happening until after it was a done deal. And I believe it was simply a unilateral decision. I don't think that's appropriate for an agency or a part of our city government that's getting $1.4 to $1.7 million a year from our tax base. I think there needs to be some oversight. I think that our current staff needs to be taken out of the hot seat, and an advisory board would help with that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Shirley.
Hi, my name is Shirley Bush. I'm a realtor with Mary Ellen Hill and Associates, and I've been working with the homeowners of Quail Point on the resale restriction. I also own a condo next door at Sunrise Palms, and we have the same resale restriction. A couple of times I have hand-delivered some packages to the city, and as far as the low to moderate income housing, which these 4 developments, only 2 that I'm involved with, were designated, I'm trying to prove that they have never had any criteria, so to speak. Quail Point, I have their marketing packets, their original packets. There is not one piece of verbiage in here that they were for low to moderate income housing. Sunrise Palms, 20% down, second home and investors, 13.5%, 30 years. So there was nothing. The only of the 4 developments was Sunrise Norte in their land lease, which is city lease, and in their CC&Rs, it mentions CHAFA financing, which I included in your package, which is 100% financing for the low to moderate income people. You mentioned something about the CC&Rs. Of the 4 CC&Rs, it's real easy. Sunrise Palms has a complete set of CC&Rs. They had their documents were recorded in August of '82. They had an amendment in '82 of December, making an amendment where we didn't have to have the numbers as Quail Point has to have. It's totally up to the city's discretion. Sunrise Palms, right now the city is allowing a price higher than what they're selling for. And there are 360 units there. The city is wasting a lot of time and money. I included in the packet what's happening in the last 6 months, the sales for like 127 to 137. The city is allowing 144 plus upgrades. Back to the different things showing that the CC&Es are obsolete for Quail Point. If an owner gives the original sale price, they can't do that anymore. The city now has records for all the units available that they can. And then they give upgrades. They just can list any upgrade they want. They can inflate, add, or whatever. The city doesn't document or verify any of these. So anyone can go in there and do whatever they want. There's a lot of paper shuffling. The city's cutting back, trying to cut back, but there's a lot of paperwork involved in all these units. There's a lot of units. Sunrise Palms has 360 units, Quail Point has 83, Desert Dorado has 88, and Sunrise Norte has 30-some. Of all the 4 developments, Sunrise Norte needs immediate attention, and they are plus or minus 120,000. They're the only ones that fit into the low to moderate income project.
You got 10 seconds, Shirley.
I have 10 seconds. Oh, yes, in your email, thank you. Density bonus laws allow granting the bonus in return for 20% of units. Sunrise Palms and Quail Point never had any units, 20% or otherwise, designated for low to moderate income housing. That is per the CCNRs, which are easy to read, per our HOA. So that has nothing to do with it either.
Thank you, Shirley.
Would you like these?
No, you can keep those. Okay. Pass them around, I'll get them back to you at the end of the meeting. Anyone else wishing to address the council during public comments? Mr. Oden. Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Joy Meredith. I'm the president of Main Street, the Merchants Association of beautiful downtown Palm Springs, California. And I've owned Crystal Fantasy there for 15 years, and I'm going to be so very brief. Linda Fort made a mistake, and she emailed me. And as president of the Merchants Association, I was mad. And I talked to Jerry, and we were both mad. And you know what? She's never going to do it again. And I totally believe that that's the fact. It was a poor judgment call on her part that she admitted right up front, which was really bold of her to begin with. As a matter of fact, right at this table in our Tourism Advisory Board, she really humbled herself to where, I just know that it was the sincerest emotion for her, and I know that she felt bad for it. And I just, personally, I know in the business world, forgiveness isn't really something we do a lot, but as far as that one point goes, I just really wanted to say that as president of the Merchants Association, and after talking to many merchants, we just feel that the tourism department does a lot of good for us, and they've been working with us a lot and trying a lot of new things. And I just don't want that particular incident to really stand out as being the whole issue here, because that would make me very sad to think that, because that group over there works really hard. I don't agree with them on everything that they do. I mean, by far, we have a lot of disagreements on various issues, but I just wanted to say that I think that was a really isolated incident, and I just wouldn't want you to judge anything based on that one fact in itself, and that's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments? Sir, come forward, please.
Where am I here?
Yep, just grab the mic and make sure you speak into it. You may want to direct it towards your throat so you don't have to worry about it being...
Okay, all right. Well, first of all, my name's Clint Holland, and I'm a owner at Quail Point. And I really appreciated the email that you sent back, because, sometimes this goes on deaf ears, and it didn't, and we appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I'm sure that, Shirley, I was late because I had another engagement, but Shirley, I'm sure, has said it all. But from an owner's standpoint, as I delineated in the email, I don't see anything but an encumbrance to the owners with that regulation, and I don't see how that benefits the city. And frankly, I didn't quite understand. I understand you're not counting it, but I didn't quite understand in the email what you said there would, maybe you'd come up with a sample, changing language or something like that. And frankly, if it's not completely eliminated, then then you still have, it's still an encumbrance. It may soften it a little bit, but you still have to go through the process. And as a homeowner, that makes it, you get ready to sell the property, somebody knows that, and you have a difficulty doing it. And if you don't sell properties, if property prices don't go up, the taxes don't go up, and so on. So it just seems like it's a nuisance to the city and an encumbrance to the owners. So we appreciate it. If you could rescind it. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming down. Anyone else wishing to address the council during public comments? Okay. We'll close public comments. We'll turn to council comments, questions, or reports. Council, anything you want to add at this time?
Yes. Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Oden.
I'd like to add to our agenda the issue of the taxi cab signage to be placed on the, to be agendized. And this week I had the opportunity to attend a function by Palm Springs Modern. And they had the model Verushka there and lots of pictures and photographs from the time. And of course, I was around in those days and remember and remember a lot of those photos. And Verushka herself was a very, very charming lady. And I'd just like to say that a special thank you to them for providing such a fine event in the city of Palm Springs.
Very good. Any additional council comments? I just want to report out that today at RCTC, the Riverside County Transportation Commission, we made an amendment to our Measure A program based on council's direction. David Barakian submitted the request to modify some of our projects from the Tachiva Drive traffic safety signal and the Racket Club and Avenidas signal, and we have reallocated $271,000 towards the Gene Autry median landscaping. So heads up on Dave's work, and we've received $271,000 reprogrammed for the purposes of getting our medians done. Okay? Let's now turn to city manager comments or follow-up reports.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, Mr. Mills.
I wonder if I could sneak in a comment.
Sure.
I didn't intentionally wait to be last. I was looking where I wrote it down. And I do remember what it was. We recently had the airport master plan go to planning commission. We'll be looking at it as well. I personally think when we're dealing with an issue as important as the airport master plan, that we should maintain our normal noticing policy of 400 feet, which is not required. But I do feel that it's an important enough project that we do notice for that project all the properties, the owners within 400 feet, and I know that's a lot, but I think that's something that we owe to everyone to make sure we get all the input that we can, especially by those mostly affected by it. So, just a comment, and I don't know when it's coming up, but it is coming up. So.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mills. Any other council comments, questions, or reports? We'll turn to our city manager for his reports. Mr. Reddy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I believe, sir, we're ready to move right into the agenda topics.
So be it. Item H is the city council study session topics. First item on the agenda is the Santa Rosa Santa Jacinto Mountain National Monument, and I'll turn to Mr. Reddy for his staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have a special guest with us this evening.
It's just Doug. What are you talking about?
It is Connell Dunning. She is the community planner for the Bureau of Land Management, who is approaching the table with Mr. Evans, our director of planning.
Oh, that special guest.
We have a presentation, and with that, I would turn the microphone over to Mr. Evans, who will introduce.
Good evening and welcome to both of you.
Tell you a little bit about the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. What we're going to do tonight is Connell will give you an overview of the National Monument, its plan, the program, and how we got here. And then I'll give you a quick summary of the comments that we've drafted for your consideration next Wednesday evening. And just like to tell you, the National Monument boundary as it goes around the edges of Palm Springs, basically it's very close to the toe of slope, if not the toe of slope. It does not include the Chino Canyon area, and it does include a portion of the property on the west side of South Palm Canyon Drive down near the former Canyon Hotel, a piece of property that's been proposed for development, and it does include all of the Palm Hills project. The rest of the areas in town, if there's an overlap of the monument boundary and potential development, it's relatively minor. Probably not worth pointing out, but those 3 areas, just wanted to tell you what was in and what was out. And with that, Connell Dunning will give you an overview of the plan, and I'll pass around basically the outline of her discussion.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Doug.
Good evening.
Thank you for having me here, Mr. Mayor and council members. As you know, the National Monument was established through legislation October 24th of 2000. And with that legislation came the requirement for us to complete the management plan within 3 years. So, voila, this is the draft. So we're getting close to having a final. Of importance is why the National Monument was established. So looking at the handouts, I'm actually on page 2 right now. The monument was established in order to preserve the nationally significant biological, cultural, recreational, geological, educational, and scientific values found in the Santa Rosa and San Jacinto Mountains, and to secure now and for future generations the opportunity to experience and enjoy the magnificent vistas, wildlife, landforms, and natural and cultural resources. So we continue to go back to this as people ask, why is there a monument? Why is it there? Why did it get established? We use that, it came directly from the legislation to help us in drafting the management plan and future direction as we move forward. So moving to page 3, why a National Monument Management Plan? Well, as I mentioned, the legislation required that it be completed, and it applies solely to federally managed lands, only to BLM and Forest Service. So looking at the map on the wall, that applies to the green squares, the Forest Service, and the Bureau of Land Management, the yellow squares.
Just BLM and just Forest Service?
Yes, just BLM and just Forest Service
Thank you.
within that boundary. And because Forest Service and BLM manage this together, one of the main focuses of this plan is how are we going to work cooperatively, because BLM is in the Secretary of Interior, Forest Service is Secretary of Ag. So we do have proposed methods for how we're going to work together long-term to manage the monument. Additionally, we need to be consistent with monument legislation and other applicable federal laws. And the biggest focus, and why we're here today, is we want to work in coordination with the local government, city governments, the tribal government, other federal governments, and other interest groups. And we value Palm Springs greatly, the National Monument, because the tram is the main way that people are accessing the land right now. Indian Canyons is another way. And all of the lands that border the monument along the slope, all of the city land, is going to be very important in the future and how people are able to experience these mountains. In addition, Frank Bogart is representing all of you on the Monument Advisory Committee, and he did share with us some of your information that Doug will be talking about. And again, I just want to emphasize that we see Palm Springs as an important gateway for people to experience the monument and look forward to how we can coordinate in the future. So moving to page 4, the issues that are addressed in this plan, mainly coordination strategies and specific non-trail recreation. The Coachella Valley Multiple Species Habitat Conservation Plan will be the avenue for any discussion about trails in the mountains, and so that information is not in this document.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Yes.
Specific non-trail recreation actions, are those the ones in the parentheses?
Those that
or
came
examples
up.
thereof? So
Examples,
the trails
those
is
are-
considered to be a recreation action you're encouraging?
Actually, trail use within the monument is something that we're going to be managing, and it's not addressed here.
Yes.
It'll be addressed in the Habitat Conservation Plan. So certainly, that's a major focus.
But there is an issue with trails, that's why I want to find out what your position would be.
Yeah, the position is that BLM and Forest Service aren't making any decisions through this plan. They're going to come out in October, around there, when CVAG comes out with the multiple species plan. There'll be an element of planning that I'm sure that Doug will keep you posted and keep you updated. But that's a stay tuned message right now,
Got
because
it.
there's no decisions here.
Thank you.
And education and outreach partnerships, how we plan to work with the tribe, a very big focus of this document.
Okay.
Non-issues, what's not in the plan, the trails issues, not in there. Things that the legislation called out specifically, we're not readdressing, and things that BLM and Forest Service are addressing, outside of this. So moving to
What is OHV?
off-road vehicle, off-highway vehicles.
Thank you.
The legislation required that vehicles only stay on designated roads, so there will be no free play areas within the boundary of the monument. on BLM and Forest Service lands. Are there any other questions about that? Okay, moving to page 5, the planning checkpoints. Just to update on the status of where we are, we began the planning process March of 2002. We're currently receiving comments on the draft. June 19th is the deadline for those comments. And we hope to have we hope to respond to those comments and have a final out to the public in September.
Are you getting comments?
We are getting comments. We usually get a whole bunch right at midnight on June 19th. So we have gotten several, but we anticipate getting many of them postmarked on that day.
Are you holding meetings to encourage comments?
Oh, certainly. We
Good.
had 3 meetings. We had one up in the Pinion community. We had one at the Palm Desert City Hall. We had one up in Idlewild with a total of 85 people
Good.
coming and bringing comments in. And we also have been providing this, a webpage and providing other various announcements for getting this information out. We have a mailing list of about 540 individuals, and we mailed it to another around 500 private landowners within the
Thank you.
boundaries. So moving to the next page, the way that the plan is structured is there's a summary, an introduction. Chapter 2 contains the proposed actions, proposed strategies for coordination, an affected environment section, impact analysis, followed by summary coordination. Moving to slide 7, the structure was the values that I called out earlier, the biological, cultural, recreational, geological, educational, scientific values. Those values are addressed in separate sections in this document and how we are going to preserve those and manage those long term. And in addition, throughout our public scoping process, we had several meetings, 3 in the valley and 2 up in the mountains. Many issues came up regarding visitation, facilities, access, uses. So there are some additional actions that we propose to address those concerns that came up.
Limited hang gliding, you specify where this can occur?
Yes, actually we're proposing to limit hang gliding in bighorn sheep habitat. So bighorn sheep habitat within and adjacent to that. This affects Vista Point, which was a historically used area. And other areas would be a case-by-case basis. We would evaluate other areas.
You're controlling location, do you control time of year based on lambing and otherwise?
For other areas, the proposed action right now in the draft is that within bighorn sheep habitat there would be no hang gliding.
How much paintball problem do you have?
We
It's cited several times.
We haven't noticed much. We're trying to be proactive and
Got it.
make sure that doesn't happen. The next 3 pages actually are a snapshot of the different areas I mentioned, the different values and the actions within those. For example, biological values, we're proposing a vegetation management strategy, how we're going to address invasive weeds. So those 3, there's 3, I have the miniature version here. But each of those 3, looking at the first one, the biological box, we have 3 proposed actions within the biological resources. And then cultural resources, a lot of those focused on how we're going to coordinate with the tribes. Recreational, the 2 that you mentioned, limiting hang gliding and no paintball. We're also proposing to prohibit recreational shooting. And again, this applies only to BLM and Forest Service lands, and it does not affect hunting. Hunting would continue to occur where it currently does. And we're proposing to remove the need for an adventure pass. Currently, the Forest Service requires an adventure pass on any vehicles parked on Forest Service land within the monument.
Hunting is not considered to be recreational.
We treat them separately in land management.
Interesting.
Yeah. And geological, we're proposing to inventory what geological resources are out there because we don't quite know. We do have a good idea of what's out there, but we want to improve our baseline knowledge. Moving to the next page, educational. We think that outreach and getting information out about the monument is going to be really important, which is why hopefully future coordination with you guys, with the Frey Building, the Visitor Center, anything else that we can use the mouthpiece of the city to get information out that even that there is a monument. And once we know what people can do and where they can do it, then it'll be a little bit easier to share that information. On that same page, access was the biggest issue brought up by the public. How can you have a national monument if you can't get to it? And then if you have private property, are we going to be bringing people onto private property? So that's something that we're going to work with the private landowners long-term and establish a relationship there and hopefully continue to address problems as they come up.
Where are your greatest access points in Palm Springs, aside from the tram?
Aside from the tram, Indian Canyons is the second biggest. The Skyline Trail, the trailheads that are back up against, right behind the Desert Museum. Let's see. Areas along the Cove. Snow Creek, but that's a little bit outside.
How about at the end of Ramon where they allow horses? You okay with that?
Are we okay with allowing horses? We're not proposing to change anything on private property. So this is only BLM and Forest Service land.
It's okay.
So, yeah.
Because we actually allocate a space on the side of the road at the end of Ramon permitting horse trailers to
Yeah.
park so that horse riders can go up the trails.
Yeah, we've been working closely with Desert Riders.
And you're okay with that? Good.
We're going to be working with Desert Riders. When the trails plan comes out, I think those issues will be addressed there. But there's no there's no trails issues in here.
I'm looking.
And Highway 74 was also a big concern with folks, and it being the only road highway that goes straight through the monument, and safety issues. So we're working with Caltrans to try to work together there.
Good.
And finishing up, fire and interagency fire plan is in the works. We've already met a couple times. And so we hope to continue to work together to get a coordinated fire plan in the mountains. The next slide, the next steps, the comments are due by June 19th. We are receiving comments by email, by fax, or by address. And I did bring, actually, the whole plan on CD-ROM for each one of you to keep. Even if you don't want to read it, it has some good information about what is the monument, why was it established, when, how. So it's nice to just keep as a reference in case you get a quick question that you need to answer. And with that, I'd like to thank you again.
Is it this report basically in CD-ROM?
It is. It's that,
Yep.
and it's the extended version.
Good,
So,
good.
It's this report.
yeah, it's this
It's
one.
the bigger version, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Appreciate the update.
Thank you.
All right. Very quickly, Mr. Mayor, a couple of items. I think in the outline and presentation you just heard, this is really a framework plan for future plans, decision-making, and strategies. So a lot of the future decisions have been deferred to the future. Probably the most critical one that we've been tracking is the trails issue. That's going to come out with the Coachella Valley Multiple Species Plan. And I can tell you that we'll probably get asked to regulate our trail uses unless there's a change of mindset in the way the plan's being looked at. And that'll come as a coordinated plan. And that's how they'll try to make a link to private property or city-type trails. The trails that you referred to, Mr. Mayor, behind Desert Museum, the Lichen Trail system, that's almost exclusively on either city land or private land, with only one little bit of the northern Lichen Trail on BLM land. Just a small little segment of it. You could walk around it if you had to. So the BLM has chosen not to put any interim regulations on that property. So I think that the decisions on trails are not addressed in this plan because it's a framework for future decision making. But we're going to be asked to do some pretty tough things on trails, and that's why we've started working so hard to try to get the information in the record on trails and how important they are to Palm Springs and the whole Coachella Valley. The one thing in reading this plan, I'd like to commend the BLM staff. They wrote a very concise plan and they delivered it on time. And that's a challenge. It's a pretty quick plan to go through, even though it's fairly thick, to find the issues that you're looking for. So it's very well organized, and it was a pleasure to read, because oftentimes you can't find anything in government-prepared documents. I think we've run into that before. From the standpoint of coordination, I've tried to keep our key property owners aware of the plan, aware that the comment period is coming up, and the Desert Riders have submitted a comment. I'll put that in your staff report. I received it today. We'll get it to the clerk in the morning, so you'll have their comments. And they really start focusing in on the issue of trails and setting the stage for future decision-making at a much higher level of legal preciseness than we've probably looked at before. It's our intent next Wednesday night, this will be on your agenda. We'll have a resolution and an attachment which we've provided to you so you can take a look at it between now and then. And I'll go over some of those points. If the council passes the resolution, we will deliver it well before midnight on the 19th. We'll try to get it out to the BLM offices by midday. From the standpoint of key issues that I'm going to just point out, not go into a lot of detail, some of our comments just have to do with subtleties on how the plan is crafted. Language is important for future decision making, and that's what this plan does. We want to make it very clear that the Coachella Valley Habitat Conservation Plan is intended to provide for take permits. It wasn't real clear. It kind of implied that maybe not, but it is intended to provide take permits in all areas so that there'd be no reason to have coverage for a species if you weren't going to issue a take permit. One of the key issues that we've just asked that they highlight and pull out of the appendix and really emphasize it. This plan does not affect private property, does not affect development within or adjacent to the monument on private land, and it doesn't affect municipal plans. The plan was written, it says that in the plan, but you really, to see how specific it was in the legislation, you have to go to the appendix. We're just asking that they lift that forward. That was a critical element for the City Council and the Tribal Council when we all looked at this once before it was adopted as a public law. One point that I'd just like to convey, I'm impressed with the BLM staff's efforts on trails and looking at the sheep issues. They've been very critical. They've been very critical of the data. They've been very critical of the other agencies, and really it's starting to be a positive light in that they're looking at the science. They're trying to make the science-prove regulations before you put regulations on the ground. We just encourage the BLM to continue that and work very hard to get good information into the public record for decision-making on all of the issues. I think one of the issues that we've had some dialogue relative to the visitor center, that the National Monument Plan should have a section that talks about the Palm Springs Visitor Center at Tramway and Highway 111. It will have more activity than any place that you can see the monument. Right now it talks about the Visitor Center at Highway 74, and we think they should add a section that deals with our visitor center for grant purposes in the future. We're going to transmit the potential developments that we have within and adjacent to the monument. We'll give them the project descriptions. We think their environmental impact statement should address the fact that there are planned developments, they are within, they are adjacent, so that there's no questions later on when decision makers in Washington take a look at this and say, well, why is this development in the monument? That needs to be clear. Those are the key issues. We'll certainly try to answer any questions. The one item that the Desert Riders letter brought up that we didn't specifically address, that you may ask us to address, is whether or not you want to push real hard for reopening of Dunn Road, not probably for traditional development purposes because of the amount of public land, but for the ability to keep that roadway open and maybe secure additional rights of way across a couple of private properties. We need the access for code enforcement purposes, fire protection, and right now we'd have to trespass if we had to get up there and do code enforcement activity. And we've done an awful lot of hauling out of abandoned vehicles out of the Palm Hills area that get by the gates, get dumped in the washes, and we're the people that go in and cleaning them up. So if you want us to add that in, we certainly can, and I'll probably adjust our comments between now and next week to add that in. But that completes our comments, Mr. Mayor. This is a briefing, and we'll certainly try to answer any questions.
Mr.
Mr. Roden.
Yes, on the planned developments, if we have a development that's planned prior to the acceptance of their strategic plan, what difference does that make in their in their scheme of doing things?
Well, I'll answer on my read of first, the public law, the act, was championed by Congresswoman Bono, should have no effect whether the development was approved before the monument or after the monument was established or after this plan is established. And that's one of the key components. Really would like that clearly stated in the plan, because traditionally in national monuments there's always fights over in-holding development. And the public law here, which is very unusual, I don't recall the exact history, but this is the first time a national monument's been designated congressionally in an awfully long time, if ever. And when they voted on it, they said, we're not going to affect private property. And they acknowledged the fact that it's right next to an urban area, which is very unusual. This isn't out in the middle of southern Utah with small hamlets around the perimeter and ranches.
Okay. Thank you for your answer. I was just concerned because of some of the work that's already been done. Okay.
Doug, in the opening years of this effort, we were concerned as a city about a buffer zone, establishing a line and a buffer zone into the city. Any indication of any buffer zone outside the plan?
Actually, the monument legislation actually states specifically that there will be no buffers.
Good.
There's a section of the legislation that states that.
Good. And has the line been clearly defined? Because we had issues early on. The line was a very big, broad line on a very small map, and we weren't clear where it was. It's all clear now as to exactly where it is.
Yes. And some of our requests for boundary adjustments were included and some weren't. You know, the Chino Cone, we asked that the boundary pull back and around the Shadow Rock development. It was. As I recall, I can't read the map too well from here. I think it moved around the developable portions of the Mountain Falls area. The one area down in South Palm Canyon I referred to, they picked up maybe 50, 60 acres within the boundary that's developable, and then all of Palm Hills. Rest of the areas, I think, were in pretty good shape. They did a pretty artful monument boundary. They didn't have some of the same cartographic issues that Fish and Wildlife Service had on habitat designations.
When we get questions from the public, to which we get quite a bit, oh, you know, I have private property, how's this going to affect me? I direct them straight to whichever city they fall into, if they're in county, letting them know that the same city building codes apply, the same county codes apply, and that this is not, the monument hasn't changed anything.
Okay. What is rock hounding?
Rock hounding is a term for the casual collecting of rocks.
Okay. I assume such.
Okay. Thanks again. We look forward to future coordination and meeting the needs of the public and recreating and meeting your needs in terms of promoting ecotourism in the future. So thank you.
Thank you for coming down. Appreciate your efforts and your work. Let's turn now to the Tourism Advisory Commission. Mr. Reddy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This issue was requested to be on the agenda by Councilmember Oden, and I would ask him to lead the discussion from his point of view, but I thought by way of introduction, we would give council a little bit of a historical viewpoint of where we've been with the tourism board, and I've asked Assistant City Manager Mr. Butzloff to start that discussion. And also, just so the council knows, Linda Ford from Tourism is in the audience this evening to answer any questions that you may have of her. And so with that, Troy, could you give council just a brief rundown of the history of the tourism and the boards and advisories and what they've worked under over the past several years?
Certainly, Mr. Reddy. It's kind of ironic that the guy who's been here probably the shortest has to give the historical perspective on the Visitors Bureau, but
it's unbiased.
It's unbiased. There you go. Back in 1989, the City Council adopted an ordinance establishing an 11-member Visitor and Promotion Board. The purpose of this board was essentially to oversee the function and operations of tourism. In addition, there were some other key functions empowered to this board. For example, the board was given the authority to oversee and advise on the promotion, advertising, publicity, and marketing activities of the city of Palm Springs, as well as to make recommendations on annual budget for visitor promotion, expenditure funds, and related issues. The actual the actual composition of the board was as follows. There was one member, either an owner or manager representing hotels with over 250 rooms, one member, an owner or manager representing hotels with between 150 to 249 rooms, one member or representing a manager or owner of a hotel with 51 to 149 rooms, and then finally, one member that represented hotels with 1 to 50 rooms. There were also 3 members from the retail and restaurant community, as well as 2 members at large that were actively involved in tourism. Finally, the City Council had the authority to appoint 2 members, with one of these members being a principal representative from the Palm Springs Desert Resorts Convention and Visitors Bureau. This particular board, to the best of my understanding, operated for a number of years, providing oversight on the visitor operations for both the Convention Center and the Bureau of Tourism. And then in 1998, the City Council, through another ordinance, decided to abolish it. I spoke to my predecessor today, Mr. Fleisig, and tried to ask him, Fleechek, tried to ask him as to what his understanding of this particular board and was actually empowered to do, as well as why it was abolished by the City Council. And of course, Dallas didn't have really any great recollection of why it was abolished, but said that it was his understanding that at the time, his understanding was that they actually had run out of things to do. And so with that, that is pretty much the history as I understand it. To kind of give you some perspective, visitor boards or tourism bodies are not uncommon, especially here in the Coachella Valley. There's a number of agencies here in the Coachella Valley, Palm Desert and Indian Wells specifically, that have oversight bodies that specifically govern the operations of their tourism or marketing function. I can speak specifically to Indian Wells, where I came from. We had the Advertising and Marketing Committee, which was made up of the 4 general managers of the resorts, the general manager of the golf resort at Indian Wells, and citizens at large. They met on a monthly basis to oversee not only the budget of the advertising and marketing program for the city, but also provided guidance and oversight as to how the city expended funds relative to tourism and marketing. Palm Desert has a very similar function where they have a board that's appointed directly by City Council. It's not made up specifically of hoteliers as the Indian Wells body, but does have hotel representation, and they also oversee the city's budget relative to tourism and the visitor center there. There's other instances throughout Southern California as well as across the United States of resort communities having a similar type of body that is essentially charged with the oversight of visitor information or convention center operations. And with that, members of the City Council, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
My first question is, do you have a copy of that report? There you go. All right. A copy of the actual ordinance itself? Yeah.
Well, now that has all my comments on it, certainly.
Yeah, I want to see a copy of the initial.
Here's the staff report, too.
Mr. Jordan, this is yours. You want to give us a lead on this?
Yes. First of all, there were some comments made earlier tonight, I guess, about a function with the powwow. Well, for me personally, I know very little about that. My comments have nothing to do with that. As a matter of fact, I requested this quite a while ago. Yeah, quite a while back. I think after reading some of the information, I think the issue is perhaps simpler than I thought. We currently have an oversight, an advisory board. So I guess the issue is whether or not it's who should appoint. Because obviously, they think it's important enough that they have done so, but it's we haven't made that designation and as a council officially. And I think basically that's whose responsibility it should be. It should be the council's responsibility to appoint the people to the board. After we talked so much about the budget this past year, and just based upon the amount of money that we give to the board, the Bureau of Tourism, I think it would be fiscally irresponsible of us not to have some oversight. Now, admittedly, we privatized this function, and it has been going for several years. But things are different today than when we set this process up. And I think it shows that we are responsible by taking an opportunity to evaluate and reevaluate some of the decisions that we've made a few years ago. Today, I think we need to take a closer look. We are not the experts, but we do have experts in this community. And I think that by appointing them to a board, and you know, I've read the ordinance that we established to initially set up the board for tourism. And it's okay. I think the composition I would like to see a little different than it was initially, because I'd like to see more emphasis directed toward the smaller hotels, which was part of the purpose of initiating this program anyway, was to really concentrate more for them. So I'd like to perhaps see greater representation from the smaller hotels. But other than that, I think what we had will actually suffice. I think and this really isn't so much of a board or a commission as a watchdog or anything like that, because we've had this board before. We know how they function for us. So it's not like we're doing anything strange. I see us simply reestablishing what we had previously to provide a conduit of information between and perhaps even the fiscal accountability loop, that gap that we are currently experiencing between knowing what's really going on in that department. And we don't know. And I think we have a responsibility to know. However, in terms of us giving the direct advice, I think we have people in the community who can assist with that. And those are the people we should look at appointing to this board. I don't know if there are others who...
Other council comments?
Do you participate with the budget?
No. No, council just, they appropriate per the contract the budget amount.
Do you with the convention center?
No, I don't. However, we have more involvement with their line items because they operate on a deficit, so we actually have a lot more involvement on their line item budgets.
But we give tourism a lot of money.
Roughly about the same amount of money.
Same amount.
And we have no input as far as the accountability.
Traditionally, that's been the case since I've been here. I can't speak before that.
I think we should. We're talking about the SMG contract next. Maybe that could be put into it.
The original VPB, Visitors and Promotion Board, was established as a council-appointed body that, are these all mine? Yeah. That was appointed by the council to oversee the tourism division when it was in the city of Palm Springs. When we privatized, the discussion was to remove the efforts because it was a private contract. And we hired a contractor based on, quote-unquote, their expertise. And there was an intent to remove the board because we did not want to tell them what to do. Otherwise, why would you privatize? They weren't just an agent for you, a manager. They were actually the company in charge of tourism. And there's a lot of lengthy debate and discussion about how to privatize and how to do it and how the contract should be set up. but it was the goal to actually sever the relationship and allow them to work directly with the community, the hospitality community, and it was their recommendation to establish an advisory committee. It wasn't ours. Again, we played very little role in determining that, and that was the intent initially. So they have been actually adhering to that as they have gone through their relationship with us. How many contracts do we have with other companies and play an advisory role or involve ourselves with their budget?
Tockwoods Creek. Do you participate in theirs?
Because of the performance of Tockwoods Creek, it has become very clear to me that we need to take a much more aggressive stance.
I recall
and that's
that evening.
why we've assigned Mr. Mikesell the duty of, we've eliminated some of his duties and moved him more aggressively over into that area.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Oden.
I think you bring up a good point when you say based upon their expertise. But the fact is, SMG doesn't have any expertise in this area. They have none. And we know that they don't have any. Yet we have experts in our community. So, and I think it's also important for us to, based upon where we are with our budget and the future of this city, I think it's just important for us to be accountable. I think people expect that of us. So this isn't, we aren't doing anything that we haven't done or that we aren't currently in the process of doing, even with other contractors. And I think it just closes that loop where between what they're doing and our knowledge of it even, so that we are constantly aware and that the experts in the community who can provide that type of guidance and advice are at their disposal. And obviously, you know, they think that that's important because they already have it. It's just a matter of who's going to do the appointing. We already have it. But I think if we're going to have it, it should come through the city and that we should appoint those persons and that they should be responsible to us, just like all of our boards and commissions.
Mm-hmm. Well, I might suggest that you're going to get in your next item a report on the SMG contract renewal. Mr. Reddy is very good at surprising us during study sessions, but what I have been told in my capacity as a member of the subcommittee, the intent is to brief us on the convention center contract, that we have not taken a position yet on the tourism contract because we wanted to get the convention center piece resolved, and I think we're going to present that tonight, and we're going to then hold off and spend the next, I guess, 60 to 90 days trying to figure out the tourism contract. So that if you wanted to look at the tourism contract, I would suggest that the discussion of the advisory commission can then be folded into that negotiation.
What does that comment mean?
That you don't have a...
No, what did the comment mean that he's good at surprising us?
Oh, I can't, in other words, I cannot predict what he's going to say.
Okay.
I mean, I would
I
not
just
dare
wasn't-
say I can't predict anyone's
I
future
just wasn't
comments.
sure what
Yeah.
that meant.
I mean, he can surprise you by going, well, I didn't realize we are going to have that on the agenda, so that's
Okay.
more than I knew was coming, so
I just
I'm
need
pleased.
clarification.
So all I know is that our last discussion, that we were going to discuss the convention center contract, and we were not prepared tonight to discuss the tourism contract, because we have not really negotiated that. The subcommittee has been focused on the convention center.
Okay.
And I believe we're prepared to give you a report on that.
Well, this is true. However, I think I requested this information perhaps even prior to the establishment of the subcommittee to do that. It's been quite a while ago. Yeah.
No doubt. I'm not questioning that, Mr. Jordan. I'm just suggesting that I'm not prepared to give you a report on how the advisory commission would or should not work until we can actually get into how we want the tourism contract to function. I'm not suggesting it's a guaranteed renewal or a guaranteed RFP. I just don't know what it is that this subcommittee is going to recommend to the council as to how to construct the relationship between ourselves and tourism, and to superimpose this one component before we actually evolve the entire process is what I'm looking for.
Well, the fact is, I'm certainly not advocating getting rid of the Bureau of Tourism, and they currently have an advisory board. So I'm simply recommending that that particular function that they currently have become part of our system. And no matter what happens with the other, component of the contract, that could still be in operation.
Okay. Council, what's your other comments? How else do you want to proceed at this time?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mills?
I think I'm certainly understanding of what Mr. Oden is talking about, and what was brought up earlier. I think, though, we don't really have a report, at least I don't, on how the current arrangement exists. Yeah, how are they recruited? What exactly is their function? Yeah, but I mean, but I'd like if it's Linda, or is there a system? Is there a way that it's set up, and understand what their involvement with the Bureau of Tourism is currently, and so we can evaluate the two. That's, so we can see where we are.
I think they meet every month, don't they?
I'm going to ask Linda Ford to come up and tell us what you got, how does it work, how's it appointed? Give us a little background, Linda, would you? Linda Ford is, of course, in charge of Bureau of Tourism. She has a number of her staff members here. Gentlemen, good evening, welcome. Got to share some mics or spread some around. Take that one, Jeff. That one's way too low. There you go. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to address the council regarding our advisory council. We are passing around the list of current advisory council members. We meet here the last Wednesday of each month here in this room. I know both the mayor and Ms. Reller Spurgeon have attended, and Mr. Reddy has popped his head in a couple of times to say hi. So we are here on a city hall level. We strive to be very non-political in the people we invite to serve on the advisory council. We strive not to have people that have a personal agenda because we represent the city of Palm Springs. So as a staff, we look at various tourism partners as well as business owners in the community as to whom we think is going to make the greatest impact to our council. We make it perfectly clear that we are a shirt sleeves council, that if you accept a position on the Tourism Advisory Council, you're going to have to roll your shirt sleeves up and help us out because we are a very small staff. As you'll notice, the people here that are listed on that sheet of paper, we've put down how they are involved with us. We find it very important and very crucial to our efforts to have this type of support. We have had people who have asked to serve on it. Absolutely. Anybody who asks us, we invite them to be a part of the advisory council.
Mr. Oden.
Who appoints?
Per the LMI contract, I do.
Okay.
I invite. I don't appoint. I invite.
Okay. I certainly think that the people that you have on here are certainly fine people, all of them. And So it's not that I even think that, that the choices that have been made of the people that you've invited are wrong. But I just believe if we're going to have advisory boards, we should be consistent throughout the city. And the type of information that I believe we should have in terms of being accountable, I think that part is missing. So that's the only difference I see in what you do and what I'm looking for the city. That's all.
Actually, if I may.
I just want to clarify, this is not our advisory board. We took action officially to repeal our advisory board. Now, if you want to reinstate it as ours, I could see it, but this is not our board by our own intention and by our own action. This exists because they wanted an advisory board. The contract may have said you will get advice from the hospital, but it's not our board. They don't respond to us. They don't get input from us. It's not the function of the board. It's not ours.
Yes. But that doesn't mean that, what I'm saying is that I think they should be, and that we want that kind of information and accountability. Certainly, I understand that currently that is not the situation, and that's why I asked to bring this back to us so that we can change that. And that's the only component that I'm looking at changing.
Once, Mr. Oden, once we no longer were a city department, that's when the advisory council came into effect.
Yes.
And that's what the mayor is explaining. Having served as a city employee when we were part of the city, and having now as part of an SMG employee, and seen both parts of it, it's actually very, very similar. We used to have a marketing committee. We have a marketing committee. The present advisory council, we discuss advertising, we discuss trade shows, we discuss public relations. We did the same with the other group. The only major difference was it was a voting, as all the commissions are within the city. There was a president that was voting on different issues. But really, after sitting on both sides of the fence on this and seeing how we worked as a Visit and Promotion Commission and as a Tourism Advisory Council, there's really not a whole lot of difference. In fact, on the positive side of it, we get much more input from the group that we have, because as Linda mentioned, when these people are selected, they have to sign up to work on a committee. We're a very small staff. We can only do so much. We've had people that have not been asked to return to the committee because they have not been able to give their fair share. They have not had the time to put into it, which we respect. So we ask of them when they come on our committee that they have to work. It's not something just to have on your resume. And that was not the case when it was a Visit and Promotion Commission. It was, again, appointed by the City Council. If they wanted to volunteer to help us out, fine. If they didn't, that was their choice. They really do not have a choice now. They work, and everybody works.
They do work. All the different events that you have, they are always there. That is absolutely a true statement.
And Mr. Oden, you had made a comment about I'd like to see the smaller hotels represented. On this advisory council list, I have next to those hoteliers the number of rooms that their property represents, and we only have one large hotel on our advisory council. The rest are mid to very small properties.
One other comment I'd like to make, a correction to the assistant city manager made a comment earlier that the Visit and Promotion Commission was over tourism as well as the convention center. That was not the case. The tourism had its own advisory commission. The convention center had its own advisory commission. And the convention center's commission eventually, I believe, dissolved.
It dissolved for the same reason. It was privatized, and we no longer had employees there, so we disbanded the convention center board because it was a contract, and we said the contract is in charge, and we pulled our board back. Same model.
Yeah, it wasn't of lack of work that our commission had to do. They had plenty of work to do.
No.
And if I also may add that those people who don't understand what we do, we invite them to serve on the council. We want them to learn what it is we're doing in tourism. We do send the minutes of our Tourism Advisory Council to City Hall. Where they go, I don't know, but we do send them over here so y'all know what we're doing.
I think that the educational component that you just described is important, but certainly there are a lot of people in this community who know very well and understand tourism because it's what they do. I can understand some of the people who might come and visit, they might not understand, but certainly there are a lot of people who do.
We're very fortunate
Yes,
that we
we
have
are.
this kind of a community. Very fortunate.
Okay?
Okay?
It's the council's pleasure at this point. What more do you want? What do you want to know?
This is good.
Okay.
No problem.
Is it the council's pleasure to investigate establishing a board? Do you want to wait until something else happens? Do you want additional information? Do you want to see what happens at the next segment of the agenda? What's the council's pleasure?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Mills.
I guess I just got my question answered, although I wasn't here for all of it. I think this is certainly it's an excellent list.
It is.
And as you mentioned, it is a working board, and as Jeannie mentioned, all these events, these people are there. We see them there. I think if we are going to privatize a board, then it's up to that, or not a board, but a function. Then it's up to that function to perform to whatever standards that we give it. And I think they should have the tools to do that in the way they see fit. If they don't perform, then this body can handle it the way it needs to be handled. And we've done that in the past. But I don't like potentially handcuffing an organization that is evaluated on what their performance is. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it gives them the opportunity to do the best job that they can do. They can do. So I'm having seen this, I certainly have a better understanding of what it is, and I there are some things that you do, Linda, that I scratch my head on, but that's to be expected, and I think you get evaluated just like every other privatization that we do. I think you keep us informed. We are not involved in your day-to-day, and think we should not be. And the board, I'm afraid a board and commission that's done, Ron, like we do it now, is going to tend to keep the privatization the contractor from, I think, doing what we essentially hired him for. So I'm actually happy with the way it sits now.
Well, Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Oden.
I think this is interesting that you should say that, because that means that we need to go back and undo quite a few things. That would be with the convention center, that would be with several other contracts that we monitor. All I'm saying is that who do we give this amount of money to, and we don't know how they're spending it, or there's no advice in it, even if we do it the opposite way, where it's based upon their showing us something. What are we shown? What are we shown? And that's rhetorical. Because we don't know. We simply do not know. And I don't think that in this day and age that will bode well for us to do that. And that's all we're asking for. That's all. It doesn't mean that we're getting in there saying the day-to-day operations, but we're saying if I'm scratching my head about an event, how many people are scratching their heads about events, about money that they put into this community? So it's just a matter of being accountable. That's all.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Ellis Burgeon.
just as an analogy, when we were talking about renewing the franchise agreement with the trash, we audited their books. How is that any different?
We're just talking about being consistent. That's all.
If I can, I'd like to take an opportunity to toot my horn a little bit, and also the Bureau of Tourism. One of the reasons why we get so much work done with a very small staff that we have is because we're non-political. We don't get tied up in all of the political infighting that happens in a small community like this. And one of the ramifications of that, I just want to bring, this is all just the print media exposure that we've gotten in the last year. This is incredible. This is promoting Palm Springs around the world.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Roden.
I'm not saying that the Bureau of Tourism is not doing a good job. I never said that. So there's no need to be defensive. For me, I don't know whether this means you're doing a good job or not, for me personally. But there are people who would. I mean, that's just paper. I mean, you print up some papers and come in and say, this means I'm doing a good job. I don't know that. But there are people in this community who could go through that and say, what is this? This isn't good. This is acceptable, but this is not. Look, and it's not, I've heard this term, you want to be non-political. You may want to be non-political, but you work for a political entity. There's a certain amount of politics that's going to take place, so it's naive to think that you're going to work outside of that arena. However, no one's talking about the manipulation of the system. We're talking simply being able to say to this community, who when they say to me, Ron, you give $1.7 million to this group, is that a wise investment? But you can say yes. I need to be able to say yes and say, well, this is what happens in some form. That's all. That's all. I think you've all done a good job. So it's not an affront to what you have done or how you have performed. It is not. That's it.
If I may respond to Jeannie's comment about an audit, SMG does an annual audit on both the convention center and the Bureau, and I assume that information is available through Mr. Kanar.
Do you get that? Do you get a copy of it? I haven't seen anything. And you know I love all you guys. This has nothing to do with this person.
We see, it's their financial audit, not program audit, they're financial audits.
You don't see the program?
No, they're
'Cause I
financial
don't-
audits.
You know, as far as the board and commission, I could care less. I could care less who appoints who. I do care about the money.
Now,
I do
when you're
care.
talking about program audit,
Yeah, the financial audit, they spend the money we give them, as does the convention center.
You get
That's true.
you get an annual marketing plan, though.
we turn that into y'all every year.
Every year.
But I'm talking about.
Right.
Along with the line
A
item,
line
I mean, of what we spend
Right.
on trade shows, advertising.
Where it all goes.
Familiarization,
You have
tours,
that, David?
promotions. Each one of you are given a copy of that.
Yeah, I've got mine in the office. We were
Every
given
year since
copies.
I've been here, and I'm
Yeah.
sure before I came.
You don't have it.
Well, if I got it, I'm sure you guys got it.
Maybe tomorrow you could see to it that.
You've got it, Ms. Relder Spurgeon.
Um,
Jeannie.
I'm still Jeannie to you.
The contract demands that at least 64% of all the dollars that they are given must be spent on sales and marketing efforts.
We
And I
spend
think you spend
71%.
70 bucks. Yeah, I was going to get to
71%
that.
of
So I was
that.
going
So
to
we're
get there.
over and
I was
above
trying to
our
get there.
contract. Thank you.
You
Let me
spend-
help you here.
Yeah. So again, we have set some criteria in the contract, albeit minor, and there were debates during that whether we should have more controls and more specifications, and the contract was passed unanimously in the current form that it's in. That's what we told them we wanted to do. So they're just simply going that way. If it comes down to who's going to appoint the advisory council, you have to realize there is an advisory body that advises tourism. It's not our people, but it's their people. And it's their money, it's tourism-generated money, it's tourism people that's there, it's people that rely on tourism for success. So it's got an oversight body. So the question is,
Mr. Mayor.
is it adequate to have you do it, or do we want to do it? And that's the significant difference. That's the philosophy. Mr. Roden.
Yeah, I just think that it's the citizens of Palm Springs' money, and I think we all are accountable for it.
And I don't deny that. So again, what does the council want to do? I'm not prepared to make a change until the entire analysis and negotiations are done on the entire project before I can recommend changing that component. I want to know if, in fact, the contract changes. So I'm reluctant to make any modifications at this time. Not saying I wouldn't look at it during the contract negotiations, but at this time, I don't see a need for it to happen quickly nor urgently, and I'm comfortable with it being in the hands of the advisory council now, and let the negotiations develop some kind of a plan for the council to review.
Well, I guess I don't see a direct urgency. I guess the only urgency that I would feel is that since we haven't had that type of accountability, that certainly there might be an urgency in that respect. But other than that, if you want to wait until we've looked at the contract, I'm not opposed to that.
I'm not sure I understand why you say you don't have accountability. What is it that you don't have that would concern you that you don't have accountability? I mean, they're accessible to you, they'll give you the numbers, they'll give you the stats, they'll give you the programs, they'll give you whatever you want. What did you want them to give you?
It is true that they give us, for example, they give us the programs, okay? And I think it would just be, I'd be more comfortable knowing that that program was run past some professional people. Well, yes, but in a different fashion. I mean, the fact is, if there's a difference between even a volunteer group in the community that does an excellent job and a city-appointed person. There's a different type of responsibility, I think, that people assume.
Mr. Ovden, if I may, we run our marketing plan and media schedule. We went through the board of directors of the Palm Springs Hospitality and Lodging Association. Howard took it to the HOPS group. We made individual presentations to the sales departments, invited the general managers to come, as well as the Desert Gate Tourism Guild. We had Barbara Stenning with the Jones Agency give the media buys that same presentation. We rely heavily on the Jones Agency to help us with trends, what kind of responses we get. So we ran it through the various entities in this city that are involved business, tourism ways.
Again, I'm okay with where it's at. What's the council want to do?
I would be comfortable to look at it again once we look at the full contract. I think that's acceptable.
Okay? And maybe you can continue to prepare documents that indicate all those bodies that you mentioned in your oral presentation. Give us a thorough and complete idea of what it is you're doing in greater detail, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Before we go away, can I run back to my chair and get one thing I want to show y'all real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, Chris, you don't have to scratch your head at this.
Who would like the copies?
No, really, I'm okay. I get those electronically from about 5 boards across Southern California. I don't need any more.
One
media
of
to read.
the dreams we had was to produce an Historic Inns of Palm Springs publication. We're very unique in our community that we have the type of lodging properties that we have. I had an ad hoc committee consisting of Frank Tyson, Bob Whitehorn, Craig Blau, and Fraser Robertson, along with Palm Springs Life, with Milt Jones being our contact there. We've worked very diligently with the small inns and boutique hotels, and this was a pay-to-play type of program, and it was not inexpensive. We have nearly 40 historic inns within the city of Palm Springs. We have 27 that are participating for the first year. This is our final proof. I can't let it go, but we are going to have one heck of a piece to promote our historic inns worldwide. I'm going to have to go to Frank Tyson's page because he really did so much work and really stepped up to the plate to help us sell this to the historic inns. And I want to point out some of these only have 5 rooms. And this is a lot of money for them to participate.
Oh, 5, 10, 9, 12, small
But they have the
properties.
history behind them, and they saw the significance of us developing this kind of piece. So one side is pictures of the property, and then a writer from Palm Springs Life went to each participating inn or hotel and got the history of the inn behind it, what movie stars stayed there. I tried to get them. Do you have ghosts? If you have ghosts in your B&B, let us know about that. So they had a writer that went and worked with the managers or the owners to develop all of the verbiage here. We're very proud of this piece. Almost ready to give you your own personalized copy. But we're very proud of it, and the committee that I mentioned worked diligently with us to make this happen, as did Palm Springs Life. So anyway, just wanted you to know I've been talking about it. Here it is, final proof. It's going to be a nice piece. Thank you for having us up and listening to our
Thank
input.
you.
We appreciate it very much.
Appreciate you all being here.
Thank you.
Take your media stuff with you. Take those 2,000 pages out of here.
I do need to add that the one little packet that is showing on the print equates to about $23 million worth of free advertising for the city. So that is just something y'all should know.
It's good to go. Thank you, Linda.
You bet.
All right, let's go to item 3 then, the SMG contract renewals. And Mr. Reddy, I'll ask you for your staff report on status of the negotiations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. The SMG contract, which is with the Convention Center and the tourism, there are 2 contracts. They expire on June the 30th. There has been a council subcommittee consisting of the mayor and the mayor pro tem that has been a part of these negotiations. We've been having ongoing negotiations, and we would like to bring a contract to council at the next city council meeting on the Convention Center portion. We have been focusing on that one to date because that one has the largest capital outlay, and in terms of what our savings could be. What we will be doing is asking for an extension on the tourism contract for a minimum of 3 months, 3 to 4 months, so we would be able to turn our focus then to the tourism side and work out any details that the council would want to see in that contract going forward. What I would like to do this evening is just give you the details of the Convention Center side. Assistant City Manager Troy Bootsloff will do that. And then, of course, if there's any comments from the subcommittee, we would have those also. Hopefully we will hear back from SMG, hopefully tomorrow or Friday, on this proposal, and if in fact the terms are acceptable to both sides, then we would anticipate having it to council on the 18th. I would note a caveat, however, the city attorney has not had an opportunity to deal with the contract in its totality, its entirety, to work out the finer points, because as you remember, the original contract was with LMI. They were bought by SMG, so the contract has to be changed globally. It's not just an easy amendment renewal. So what will be before you on the 18th will be the basic numbers, if in fact you have agreement, and then to be approved in a form ultimately acceptable to the city attorney. So with that in mind, I would ask Mr. Butzloff to brief you on the numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reddy. Before you have a proposal that the city staff has submitted to SMG. This particular proposal comes about after lengthy discussion with the hotel community, as well as discussions with the finance director and other members of the city staff. What you are looking at here under the fee schedule is essentially two options. Under option 1, you have a lower base potential in years 1 and 2, but we're offering an incentive fee, whereas in option number 2, it's a higher base amount but no incentive fee. The purpose for this is that there is some concern whether or not there will be an opportunity to make incentive in years 1 and 2 simply because the convention center is going to be under construction. But we wanted to offer SMG the option of either choosing the lower base amount with an opportunity to make incentive or a higher base with no incentive in the first 2 years. The other parameters of the offer in years 3, 4, and 5 remain consistent between both options. We're offering a 2% adjustment after year 3, so in year 4 and 5 there will be a 2% adjustment, and those numbers are reflected there in the option matrix. As for the incentive fee calculation, this took a lot of work on all parties' part to come up with something that we felt was reasonable and would also help measure performance and provide a reasonable threshold for the convention center to achieve. And how it's broken down presently is that it's based on 60% of the incentive fee would be based on room night sales. The remaining 40% would be broken down into 2 categories: one, financial performance, representing 30%, and 10% towards customer satisfaction. Under our proposal, SMG would have to achieve the room night sales goals each year to qualify for the 40% additional incentive. So if they fail to achieve the 60%, or excuse me, the room night goal for any given year, then they would not be eligible to receive any of the remaining 40%. So there is a potential that they would not receive any incentive in any given year. So that is a significant change from the way the contract is currently constructed. Yes, sir.
You're saying that they have to make 60% of the room night goal?
No, that's 60%. No, they have to make 100% of the room night goal.
Okay,
but
in
60%
order.
of the incentive is based upon room night sales.
So it's 100%?
Correct.
Okay.
Of the room night goal.
Correct.
It's on page 2.
And the room night goals are detailed, as the mayor indicated, on page 2. And you can see in fiscal year 03-04, it's 60,000 room nights per year. And then it goes up to 80 in 04-05, jumps to 100 in 05-06, and then gradually climbs to its peak at 120 room nights per year in 07-08. Under the financial performance criteria, we have worked with Mr. Kanar on developing what we feel is a reasonable net cost goal for the convention center to operate under. In fiscal year 03-04, it's based at 1.3. That remains the same in 04-05, and then gradually decreases by $100,000 per year all the way to $1 million in 07-08. This particular cost goal includes their base management fee, which is calculated into that, and a portion of the incentive fee, this portion of the incentive fee is the lesser of 30% of the base management fee, or the actual difference between the net cost goal and the actual performance. So when we're calculating that, we'll take a look at what their actual performance is. Under customer satisfaction, which represents 10% of the entire incentive, we've designed this so that we would measure customer satisfaction from 2 points. One, from the key stakeholders of the convention center, such as the group meeting hotels of our community, Hotels of Palm Springs, the Palm Springs Desert Resorts Convention and Visitors Authority. What we'd be requesting here is that we conduct an annual survey of those key stakeholders. The second instrument that will be conducted is at least 2 surveys per year, consisting of at least 50% of all meeting planners that have contracted with the convention center over the prior 12-month period. And the purpose of this survey would be to gauge their satisfaction with respect to the convention center's performance in assisting these groups in the planning and servicing of their conventions. We would recommend that as part of this offer that SMG and the city work towards the design of an evaluation criteria for measuring customer satisfaction, but at a bare minimum, SMG would be required to meet or exceed any evaluation criteria that is developed between the parties to qualify for the 10% incentive. We would also suggest that any incentive that is paid under this program go directly back to the convention center to be used as a financial reward to the employees of the convention center for achieving compliance with customer service and trying to incentivize them to do a better job in providing customer service. And we would work with Mr. Dunn, the convention center general manager, in developing a performance-based incentive plan for the employees of the convention center. And with that, Mayor and members of the City Council, that represents the current offer we have put forward to SMG. As the city manager indicated, we just sent this out to him today. We've indicated that if we could hear back from him within the next couple of days, we would add this to your council agenda for the meeting of the 18th.
Okay. Thank you, Troy. Questions? Understand again on the base fee incentive, they can only get an incentive that is equal to but not greater than their base. So we entertained the idea in some of in our opening negotiations of a higher base fee with a lower incentive. The last model we had that they saw was a 225 base and a 175 incentive. So they could not get more than 175. The total would be $400,000. We thought instead we'd push this thing to a 200 with the impression that the first 2 years are going to be very difficult to meet the goals, especially on the room nights when you're dealing with construction issues. Now, to give you an idea of the construction issues, one will be the fact that the convention center itself will not be as available because it has construction, and we have to stop putting people in there so we can, in fact, build the building, do demolition, and so on and so forth. Second issue you should be aware of is the actual size of the room will be reduced somewhat, although not significantly. It will be somewhat reduced because we've got to bring in artificial interior walls from the exterior walls so that we can close the building off while we tear down the exterior wall to allow for the expansion. So they're going to be with limited space and with limited time to rent it. It's going to be a challenge for them to get the room nights. The numbers, though, on the room nights, they have not seen these room nights. I think we've elevated them since their last review. They saw, I think, 60, 80, 95, 100, and 110 as the last one. So we've kind of pushed those last couple of 3 years up a bit with the anticipation that we should be able to get more work out of them based on the fact it's a bigger box. They should be able to produce higher numbers. On the cost goals, we've been dealing with this for a number of years. I turn to Mr. Kennard for some background. We had numbers in early years as high as 1.8, I think, in some of the really early years, some of the documents we've got here, and we've been trying to drive those numbers down every year we can. We found the problem being in the last go-around, we drove that number down, which kept the cost down, but then they weren't spending the money to get the conventions. So we had to get a balanced approach to forcing room nights and keeping costs down. So we did sort of a balanced approach. And then we included, of course, the customer satisfaction and the component that was introduced last week at a meeting that Mr. Oden and I attended with the Hops group at a breakfast was that we'd have the ability to have the large hotels take a look at this. So they seem to be somewhat supportive at this point in time. And again, I defer to staff to concur with that Hops is in favor of the status as we see it today.
Well, I think it looks like you guys did a good job.
Trying to drive the cost down, Jeannie, and guarantee more rooms. And again, as Mr. Oden asked for clarification, if they don't reach the room night requirement, they are not eligible for any incentive pay, regardless of the rest of it. They've got to get to the room nights and then look at the back 40%. It is truly the back 40 they got to try to get to, but they can't get there unless they meet those room nights, and those are aggressive demands. The best room night we ever had was it 100,000 one year? And I questioned that, and I was told that they had somehow not calculated it properly. So I've asked that staff review that and find out whether or not there's an ability for us to review the compensation we gave it. If the numbers were inaccurate, then should we get a modification in our compensation from prior years, as if and refund some of the money we paid them? If they did not actually meet the goal, then should we get some sort of a return, a rebate of some of the monies? So we're still looking at that. And they had projected 100,000 room nights, I think, in 1 year. You want to come on in, Tom? Tom's going to give you the more accurate story now. Tom?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Actually, we didn't have a room night component in the current contract. For the last several years, it was only the financial incentive. So if they met the goal of reducing the net loss to a certain dollar amount, they got the incentive. So the room nights actually didn't play into the calculation at all.
Where am I hearing that they had, in fact, projected at one time 100,000 room nights, and we had paid them on that? How long ago was that?
The last time we paid them based on room nights was 92, 93, somewhere around there. It was early in the contract.
It was nowhere near 100,000 then.
I don't believe it was that. When they hit the 100,000, I think there was some confusion about how they counted the room nights, and they changed their methodology kind of, about 4 or 5 years ago. Instead of counting the total number of room nights booked, they tried to count the total number of room nights actually realized, and that reduced the total because the booking room nights tend to be a little bit higher. Not everybody shows up, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we're basing this number on sales, not on bookings.
Right, but as far as any kind of refund or anything, there really isn't anything due from that.
Okay. There was a component in their early negotiations which we wholeheartedly rejected at the subcommittee level. They had asked to take control of F&B, food and beverage, the catering, if you will. And they saw that as an ability for them to generate more money. After discussing that, we decided that we did not want that to happen, that we wanted to stay with Savory's, and we have been negotiating with them, and we'll hope to bring that forward in a formal presentation too. Savory's done an excellent job for us. They're here tonight. We're hoping to actually secure a contract with them and then have SMG actually manage them, I believe is how we're going to try to structure it. So the contract's with us directly. The contract with Savory's is directly with the City of Palm Springs, and SMG will manage it for us. And they will not derive any financial benefit from that contract. And then we'll ensure better quality that way. Okay, and we'll look forward to bringing the Savory contract to you in a future date. So there's your snapshot as to where we're at right so far. And we had a few papers and a few things to look at and some analysis, but I think it's worked out very well. Anything else, Council, on that? No? Okay. That's easy. We'll continue down this path, and we'll give you an update when we get a response back from SMG. Now, is there anything else on that issue, sir?
Just for clarification, then, what's probably going to be required is extensions then of both contracts. If we can get approval on the numbers, and council will approve in the numbers in theory, again, the city attorney is going to need to put the contract together. We'll need an extension of the contract. However, we will ask the attorney to write the contract that it would be backdated to the beginning of the extension date, so we would derive the lower costs.
That's fine.
Okay.
And just for clarification, we haven't received a draft of anything at this point. This is the first time I've heard any of this, so it's not like we've been in process and there's delay. They've been focused on the business points, and they really want to kind of conceptually get the deal approved by the council and then start working on the documentation. So.
Okay. Comfortable with where we're at so far?
Yes.
Good.
Great job.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda then is the release and/or removal of resale restrictions. Inasmuch as we've received a number of documents already, I have reviewed a number of these documents, as I'm sure you have. And it came to my awareness, I believe yesterday, that in the file are a number of properties that reference an escrow company. That happens to be the one that I derive my income from. So with that, I will abstain on this issue and pass gavel to Mr. Oden, and I'll bid you all good night.
Before you come up with this issue, we're going to take just a brief 5-minute recess. 4, release and removal of resale restrictions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I would like to ask John Raymond, our Director of Community and Economic Development, to the table. He's going to give the staff report. This comes by way of, this was requested by several members of the community and of the real estate community as a request to the council members to relax resale restriction covenants based on the history of these have been on a density bonus. And it is somewhat of a complicated matter, and I would like Mr. Raymond to give the history, and then certainly there will be questions, and I believe there are members of the people from those condominiums and also some of the real estate agents are in the audience if you would have some other questions you would like to ask of them. And with that, I would ask Mr. Raymond to give the staff report. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The resale restrictions, and I sent you a packet today. I'm going to hand out, I made modified version of it, and there's an additional page on it, and I've got yeah, there's a couple of changes. There are some blanks and things on there. There's 4 subdivisions in the city that are under these resale restrictions that we're talking about tonight, and they are Quail Point, Sunrise Palms, and Desert Dorado, and then one that's a little bit different and has a little bit different situation is Sunrise Norte. These are all the first 3 are roughly bounded by San Rafael Racket Club, I believe Aurora, and Sunrise Way. The first 3 had resale restrictions placed on the homes as part of a program that the city created back in 1980. When the city first did a general plan amendment, that area had a general plan designation of blow sand and airport noise. And it did a general plan amendment in February of that year to change it to what they called controlled density subdivisions. And then in December of that year, came along with a program that the city council adopted called a covenant control mechanism. And it was a way of basically legalizing developers' requests for density bonuses on the subdivisions that were being built there. And if you remember back to 1980, 1981, the inflation environment, this is based on the assumption that the inflation at the time was about 7-8% typically, and that interest rates were, we were looking for incentives to try to get interest rates down to about 12.5% on these projects. So it was a different kind of homeowner environment, and I believe in doing the research on it that the density bonus was a way of, again, attempting to make housing a little bit more affordable given the high interest rate environment and the escalating sales prices of real estate at the time, back in the 70s and early 80s.
Could I just get
Sure.
a clarification on that point? Did they or did they not receive a density bonus?
All of the subdivisions received density bonuses.
Okay.
So they have the density bonuses on them. They were allowed to build at a higher density than was normally allowed by the general plan and by the zoning code. And the problem that creates is that a density bonus under state law has to have an affordability restriction on it that says 20% of the units have to be available for lower moderate income families. So what the city did was they came up with a mechanism later that year called this covenant control mechanism that created these, quote, resale restrictions. And there were a lot of assumptions that were probably conventional wisdom at the time, but now looking at it 22 years later, were pretty flawed. One was in later that year, about a year later, when they were approving one of the subdivisions, they had a table of what the median income was and what the low income, median income, and the moderate income, which is 120% of median. And they said for a family of 4, the moderate income, 120% of median, was about $27,700. And in the staff report, it says that in the above figures are current to July 1st of that year, and they can be adjusted to future dates by assuming an 8% increase a year. Well, we know that income didn't rise by 8% a year from 1980 to now. That would set the moderate income, if that were true, moderate income level, 120% of median today would be about, for a family of four, about 140,000. And so that's a fairly significant income. So you can see that incomes didn't rise the way that the program anticipated it did. The other problem it had is that it assumed that the rise in income and the rise in CPI were going to be the same. They used the same assumptions that incomes would rise by the same as CPI, so that these would always be affordable. The prices were set, and the subdivisions were sold to be affordable to people of moderate income. And there's a whole set of calculations that say, you know, based on this assumption, that assumption, it's affordable, and that forever it was going to track the same. What happened over the last 22 years is that income stagnated. We know that they went up very slowly. The moderate income level today for family of four is $61,200. So it's a little bit more than doubled from 1980. CPI has gone up quite a bit higher than that, even though in the last 7-8 years it's been rather low. And what's happened is that real estate prices rose through the 80s, crashed in the early 90s, and have been zooming upward since. So the relationship of those three numbers, the rise in real estate prices, the rise in CPI, and the rise in income, that the program anticipated all would rise at basically the same amount, and that everything would track. The numbers were all over the place. So what's happened now is that 22 years later, 21 years later, everything's out of whack. And that's just from a sort of a fundamental point of view on the program. I'm just going to walk you through some of the other problems that we have with the resale restrictions as they exist now. Because what they're based on is that if you bought a house today and you sold it 2 years from now, the restriction says you can sell for what you paid for it, plus your closing costs and everything, and then plus CPI, and that's it. So, you know, what happens is that if you buy a house for, you know, $100,000 and CPI is 2% a year, 2 years later you can sell for $104,000. Now the market may say you can get $154,000. And so we've had for the most part in the last 7 or 8 years, the prices have been okay because they're still recovering from a dip in the early 90s. But in some cases, you do have cases where somebody has an offer on a house for, you know, $200,000, and you do the calculation, and they can only sell it for, you know, $154,000, and you have to, you know, decline the price. Now maybe that's the intent of the program, but that's you know, that's created a lot of ill will, but it hasn't necessarily ensured that the house is affordable for a moderate income family. So that's kind of a description of how the restrictions work now. The restriction, sure.
Chair, I made the comment that maybe that was consistent with the intent of the program. I mean, again, the intent was to keep the housing affordable to people with less income. So by controlling the price that it could be sold at, the intent at that point in time was that then therefore people with lesser incomes could afford to buy those houses, and it's affordable to that segment of the market. So that, just to clarify that, there was an intent there. It wasn't like just kind of a silly idea. There was an intent. The problem is over a long period of time, I mean, whether it's those three numbers performed in relationship to each other or any numbers would, over, you know, a 20-year period of time, these things get out of sync. And I think another little illustration there is that currently, in terms of housing programs, you're required to income restrict units for 30, 40, 50 years. Well, so these kinds of issues are going on all over the place because these programs are now getting to be old enough that you do have 20 years of performance, and it's just very difficult to take a regulatory program, put those kinds of things on it, and keep it in track. So the only point I really want to make was that there was a purpose, and what they came up with, and obviously was before our time when all this happened, but well, there isn't much left that was before my time, but this happens to be one of them. Sorry.
Okay. I guess now that we understand what has
That's the
happened,
history.
what do we do now?
Well, one of the problems is that the restrictions as they exist. First of all, there's a flaw in tying it to CPI and the resale price. I think that's the main flaw. Another flaw from the practical standpoint is that the restrictions themselves are not a separate regulatory agreement like David just described in the agency that we do on agency projects, and we record that agreement kind of on its own on the title. What happens is that when you buy the house, it says that it's subject to all the provisions that are contained in the CC&Rs. People sometimes read the CC&Rs, sometimes don't read the CC&Rs. Some of the subdivisions are they're just at this point now, they're just neighborhoods. They're not gated. There's no HOA. So people don't even necessarily anticipate that there's quote CC&Rs on their house. They're just buying a house on a street. And so what we've gotten over the last several years are people that say, I mean, maybe you could take the case, well, you should have read it when you bought the house, but they say nobody told me when I bought the house, and now I'm trying to sell the house, and the buyer or the buyer's agent or the escrow agent is demanding that we get a consent on this, and how come I didn't know about this 5 years ago? It's sort of a self-police. We don't have a mechanism. It's not obvious on the title. It doesn't say on the title it's subject to a resale restriction by the City of Palm Springs. It just says CC&Rs. So that's one problem, and then therefore that leads to self-policing that then leads to kind of a spotty compliance, because we're not out there writing down, looking to see what houses are up for sale and then sort of tracking those. So over time, just on the enforcement side, that there's been like inequities. I mean, somebody would have sold a house next, this house, and it's never been tested by the formula, and then the guy next door goes to sell, and it's a different agent, different escrow company, different title company or something, and they come in and they're told, you can't sell your house for what your neighbor sold his house for because it doesn't meet the CPI test. So it creates an inequitable situation.
Bottom line on this.
I think really you go to the last page.
Okay.
Your
I'm going to go right to the last page.
No, I wanted to make a comment.
Okay.
Bottom line is that when they were built, we as a city allowed them to build more than was allowed by code at the time.
That is correct.
I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Now, how do we justify that?
Well, the way that's, technically the only way that's justified with the density bonus is that 20% of the units, if you were to do that today, you would have to covenant to the developer that 20%.
We did that then.
Right.
And they're still there.
Well, we did it then with a program that sort of created blanket restriction for all the units based on the resale price. What we would do today, if we were to do this today, like David was saying, we would create a restriction based on the income of the buyer. If it's for lower moderate income, you would create a program for lower moderate income buyers. And you would say, if you sell it to a moderate income buyer, then you're okay. The buyer comes in, they do the income test, and therefore you can sell it for whatever price that person can qualify for on a mortgage. As long as they're moderate income, you're good. Because that's the underlying, that's the legislative purpose of the program that was created in the first place. They just didn't do it right. So that's how we would do it today if we were to create such a program today.
Did these people that bought those units, though, bought them at a moderate income level, did they not?
The original buyers, there's a whole staff report that says, yes, the prices are set, based on, certain mortgage assumptions, et cetera, and therefore these prices are set to be available to people of moderate income. But over 20 years, you've had resales and you've had, a lot of sales activity there.
Okay, JR, the brochures don't say that, the original brochures, but when they actually came in to apply for a loan or to actually secure that property, what would happen?
Well, the staff reports, there was a council action on August 5th of 81 for Desert Dorado. And there was another one for September 16th of 81 for Harmony Homes, which I believe is Sunrise Palms. Yeah. And they both have, there's whole sets of calculations in there about the sales price, the prevailing interest rate at the time, with a 10% down, and what the mortgages would be, and then there's income calculations, and they say, voila, these are, this is housing available for people that are moderate income. And that the developer or the applicant has asserted that this will remain moderate income housing, basically forever.
So even though that wasn't on the brochure, when they actually...
It was not marketed that way.
Okay, it wasn't marketed that way.
No.
It was in the CCNRs. I mean, people, when they go to buy a piece of property, it's they get a title report. Title report says that there's a set of CCNRs recorded against the property. Now, as a lawyer, whenever I see that, I automatically go ask for a copy of the document and I read it. And so that's like 3% of the population of the United States, I guess, does that. And most people think, well, it's a long document. I don't want to read it. I don't want to look at it. So I'm certainly very sympathetic that, practically speaking, it's probably very true that a lot of people buy and they're not aware of this. It's something that the broker community today is supposed to be doing a better job of making sure when they're dealing with buyers and sellers that they're aware of unusual situations like that. And if people are dealing with their lawyer or whomever, their lawyer should help them discover that. So technically it was there, but practically speaking, it may very well be the case that people bought property not really being aware of this. It is true that when these sales occur, we actually, every week I'm like being given a piece of property that is proposed for a sale, and the staff has done a calculation of whether it's below the threshold, and I look at that and then I sign off on it. So we do have a process, and people are aware of it to the extent that they are coming through our process, getting the approvals that the sale is meeting the criteria. But I'm sure is the case that there are people out there that maybe were not fully aware of this when they acquired the property.
What are our limitations in addressing this situation?
Well, that's a really good question. Obviously, one aspect is the issue of our meeting our housing goals and the state requirements. And it's an interesting thing that the density bonus program was really set up by developers so they could get additional density. And it hasn't really been counted through the SCAG process. And so legally, we do not necessarily, the releasing these units so they're not in this housing stock anymore probably won't be caught by any review agency, so it's not necessarily a legal problem to release it. It's more of a policy issue that we know we have certain affordability of housing stock. I was talking to somebody just yesterday that was saying that they would have liked to continue living in Palm Springs, but they couldn't afford housing for their family size, and so they moved to Cathedral City. So the city does have an interest in preserving housing stock for all economic levels. Part of what occurred to us in this circumstance, we can see the current program doesn't work, and JR on that last sheet is making some recommendations in terms of how we could change the program to track income, for example, in a manner that we'd be measuring the right thing instead of the wrong thing. So that change in the program would help achieve the original goals. However, one of the things that is done in housing programs today is also to create some flexibility. If there's a circumstance where the person wants to remove the restrictions, then you create an opportunity for them to eliminate the restriction, and they want to do that because there's been a great escalation in price, and they want to capture that escalation. And one of the things that will do is probably gets them out of what the income level they were at and moves them up to the next level. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but their benefit from the program should potentially be shared back with the public agency in terms of our trying to recapture some of our housing money so that we can continue to utilize that money to provide housing at this income range.
Would you explain about the housing monies?
Well, the city, because we have a redevelopment agency, 20% of our money through the redevelopment agency has to go to housing programs. And so we have a housing fund, and we utilize that fund to purchase property and assist developers to develop certain kinds of housing. And in this instance, where this housing was really intended to be part of that housing stock, perhaps one situation, basically, I think what Chair is recommending is that we do a combination program. And the combination is that we replace the current restrictions with a set of restrictions that properly measure what we're trying to measure. But secondarily, we create the opportunity to buy out of, if somebody can get a qualified person in there, great. You know, they get the qualified person in and they sell for whatever they're going to sell for if they get the qualified person in. If they can't find a qualified person and they basically want to be totally relieved of the restriction, we would let them do that if the city, our housing fund, receives a portion of the increment of increase that would go into the fund to help develop other housing elsewhere in the community. And I think, Chair...
So that money would have to be used for housing the
have
same
to be
way
used for housing.
as our housing
And we
fund.
basically would give the property owner the ability to benefit on a 2-to-1 ratio from what the housing fund benefit. So they would receive $2 for every dollar that the housing fund would get back. Now, that's just a proposal. I mean, this is something that if the council wanted to modify it or go a different way with it, it's just, and you know, you could make the policy decision that we will let all these restrictions go with no return to the housing fund. That, again, I think that legally, although this was set up with a certain thing in mind, it kind of slips through the crack in terms of the housing programs. And so if you decided to let it go with no restrictions, you could do that. I think staff, knowing what our housing needs are, feels that it wouldn't be unfair to recapture a part of the appreciation to go back to the housing fund so that we can utilize that money to try and develop other housing that would fit the needs of those segments of our community.
Okay, JR, would you quickly go through your recommendations?
Well, the recommendation for the first 3 subdivisions would be to replace the current set of restrictions with one based on income like David was talking about. And that would be set at the moderate income level. This is not low-income housing, but moderate. And for example, a 4-person household is an income of about $61,200 based on the current standard. That we would create, we'd kind of pull it out of the CC&Rs and create a new separate regulatory agreement that's recorded separately on the title, so that it shows up on the title, boom, and you don't have to rely on somebody reading or not reading the CC&Rs. But that it would be time limited. Say, for example, 10 years, 10 years from now, and then would also contain the buyout provision. And the buyout provision would kick in when a non-qualified buyer, that is someone above moderate income, would purchase a property, but would be based on the existing CPI formula. So we'd hold that formula there. And to give an example, if based on the CPI formula, you could sell a house for $150,000, the offer is at $165,000, then what we're talking about is not the whole equity, which might be $100,000, but really it's that $15,000 difference between what it could sell for based on the formula and what the actual offer is. And that we're recommending the 2-for-1 or recapturing a third of that amount, but then capping it at $10,000. So in the instance where somebody potentially has held a property for a long time, the CPI hasn't caught up, and there might be a $100,000 gap or something in the CPI versus the actual price. You're not grabbing $33,000, but you're capping it at 10. And it's different from the way the redevelopment law requires equity recapture on affordable. We just did that on Cottonwood Chuckwalla, where if somebody sells a house in the first year, if they sell one of those new houses, we would get 100% of the equity that they make in the first year, and then that declines down to 10%. So that's the way redevelopment law works, but this is a different thing because it's a city. The original CC&Rs ran for 60 to 65 years. This would effectively shorten the period, the total period, from the beginning when they were originally built to when they would run out to roughly 25 to 30 years. Because in a lot of cases, they've been running for about 20 years. We're talking about potentially adding another 10. And it would shorten the amount of time that they would be subject to that. Again, under the existing, they're running for 60 years. So that's our recommendation on that. Sunrise Norte has the additional complication of they're on a lease, and we own the land. We're the landowner. And they're down to now 29 years left on the leases, and therefore people buying there can't get 30-year mortgages. So we need to extend the lease. But they also have the same sort of resale restriction, so we would say apply the same change in the resale restriction to that subdivision, but then, excuse me, to hire an appraiser to calculate the fair market value of the lease, both the leasehold and the fee interest, and then extend the leases an additional 31 years, bring them out to 60 years, and have them float up to fair market over a period of 10 years. That's what's being done now in some of the condo subdivisions down in the canyon that are on older Indian leases. And typically in a lot of newer land leases, there's a transfer fee provision. We're recommending that you consider that. And that's only for Sunrise Norte, that upon sale that there's a transfer fee of 1% of the sales price that would flow back to the city or the CDBG program. And then there's one last wrinkle, which is that there's a couple of the leases that are no longer leases anymore, that somehow the underlying fee interest in the land was conveyed probably upon sale of the house. I think it's three houses there. So we need to look at that and figure out how we can get that land back from those owners. So that concludes my presentation, and be certainly happy to answer any questions.
Council.
Mr. Mayor.
Chris.
I happen to be the architect on Sunrise Palms back in the early 80s. I remember working with the owner, which was Harmony Homes, going through this whole process. They really modeled it after Desert Dorado.
Right.
That was the first one that went through. I remember sitting in the audience listening to the discussions of the then Planning Commission about how do you enforce this, how do you make sure this happens, and how to make it simple, how to make it obvious, and it doesn't appear to have worked as well as it should have been, should have, or was intended to. There's no doubt that the project received additional density to the 20% tune, I guess, which than other properties around it. So there was an advantage derived from this. Now, it probably didn't help the original developer. Well, it did help. It did help him initially, but not nearly to the point it's going to help the current one who's maybe looking at selling, the current homeowner who's looking at selling. And you know, helping is a bad word. It's just somehow this thing got sidetracked. And I don't, you know, JR, I'm looking at what you're talking about doing here. I have a question from a zoning standpoint. I mean, if these restrictions go away, then that becomes then a zone change issue, or a PD modification, or however it was done, in order to make it consistent with the general plan, I think.
Well, I think that, you know, that is one of the issues that, you know, originally, and I've been kind of pushing on the release of these for at least 5 years, probably since 1997, when I first started doing housing and was sort of overseeing these. And but when we started researching it, and you realize that it was that we didn't know originally. You know, when you come in 10 years later or 15 years later, you don't even know where these things come from. They're just there. And then when we realized that it was a density bonus issue, we've dealt with that on other subdivisions, and you realize that it does, to walk away from them, it does create a big question mark from a land use point of view, because now you have a subdivision with a certain underlying zoning that has a higher density on it. And the law, I think, well, I'm not the lawyer, but I don't think the law says you can't do it, but it doesn't say you can do it. That, you know, that you can time limit density bonus and, you know, for a certain period of time, and then after that, it's okay. And that you don't have a conformance problem down the road. So that's one of the reasons that we kind of shifted the recommendation from just release all these to why don't we at least try to make a restriction that works a little bit better.
Mr. Mills? Didn't have a question.
Yeah, just really kind of following that one. So, I mean, I think the proposal and the way you're setting it, now whether or not that works exactly, to put a benefit back into the housing fund, because certainly that you know, that was what it was done to create low and moderate housing. It's a good way to do it. It may not be a popular way to do it, especially to people that were not aware of what they were buying. And it's not. I doubt very seriously if it was the original homeowner that didn't know what he was buying.
Right.
It was the
second and third
yeah.
and fourth and.
Yeah. So I know I would, but I think however we do it, it needs to be consistent with our general plan and our zoning ordinance, which is an opportune time to make that happen. If we're since we're modifying the general plan anyway. But you know, JR, whether or not all these numbers make sense and the 1/3, 2/3, you know, I don't really know. But I think the solution works. But I think Mr. Alshire is going to have to be comfortable with it.
You know, I think in terms of your comment about it not necessarily being popular, I think the reason that it's implementable is because you're able to say to the homeowner, well, if we don't make a change, you continue with the current restriction. Now, we can offer you something that we think over time will be more practical and give you greater opportunities. Which do you want? Because at the end of the day, if there's going to be a new thing recorded against the property owner has to agree to that. But I think the reason I think we can get there is, I mean, if they don't want to deal with all this, then we can just continue with the current restriction. But I think after it's explained to people, I think that the option that JR has developed will be more attractive to everybody than the situation they've got currently.
I would, and then in the case of Sunrise Norte, which is lease, it's just like any other Indian, like an Indian lease, you can go back, renegotiate, and you can buy an extra 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. But that's not really what you're saying here in doing that, is it? That you can, the individual leasee can come back to the city and negotiate, and maybe at that time, then.
That is what he's saying. He's saying extend the leases another 30 years. So
Well, we're going to offer it at, like in a blanket offer, I guess.
For a dollar amount.
For a dollar amount. And that if they sign up with the new lease and the lease extension, then they're going to sign up to get to, they're paying right now $12.49 a month for a land lease on there. Now, the intent of that originally, again, was affordable housing. And I think it's still, the Sunrise Norte, more than the other 3 subdivisions, it still really is affordable housing. However, it's not, I don't think it's any longer really low-income housing. And so I think if you set a long enough target period, like 10 years, to float to a market rent, I think that's pretty acceptable.
Thanks, Rob.
What effect does it have if we remove homes from our affordable housing stock?
Well, in our affordable housing stock that we manage, through the agency, different restricted units, when we do the state controller's report and the reports to housing and community development for the state, you have to report that it's been removed from the inventory and then explain why. These may have in 81, 82 been reported. The program was described in the housing element, the 1983 housing element, but we do not count them. We have not counted them since I've been doing HCD reports for the last 7-8 years, and so they're not officially part of the city's affordable housing inventory. They're just there. And the restrictions are there, and that's mine. Sorry. Anyway, so it's probably, if we were to remove these, I think David described it earlier, it's probably not a detriment to the city's actual official affordable housing inventory.
Well, but I think there's 2 senses of that question. From a legal standpoint, from the agency, the way it's not a problem. We're okay. For the question of practically speaking, how does our housing inventory break down? That may be more of a question for Doug in terms of working on our housing element. I'm not sure, what the how many units we have in each category, and whether this is going to tend to allow the units to move from one category into another. I don't know who knows that.
Okay. One of the things to me that's important is that with all of the correspondence that we've received from the property owners, the homeowners, that they want some sense of relief from these restrictions. And you have come up with a set that you think is acceptable, and the same with legal on these, correct? Have we discussed these at this point with any of the property owners from these various
Not really.
associations?
The initiative or the push that Shirley organized in Quail Point was for a release of these. you know, the CCNRs say that, you know, if you have to go and get, I think in their case, 51% of the homeowners and 75% of the mortgage lenders to consent to it. And she's gotten over 80%, I think, in both categories. So, you know, certainly, I mean, if it were me, I'd certainly want it to just be released. And so I'm certainly sympathetic to, you know, to that desire. And we came up with something that we think, because of the sort of legal / practical issues of how they were created and why they were created, is probably a second best alternative.
Council, you have any specific recommendations at this time?
I have one real specific recommendation. Let's not do this again.
Yeah, please.
The law that allows developers to get density bonuses was imposed by the legislature. And one of the reasons that the law doesn't really deal with all this is obviously what the development community was really interested in is getting the density bonus on the development part of this. What happened with it long term was not really their concern. So that's why the statute doesn't really deal very well with what happens afterwards. But the reality is, if a developer comes in and asks us for a density bonus,
You have to give it to them.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying that, I mean, the density, even when all these projects went through originally, the density bonus was never the problem. It was, how do you enforce it year after year after year? And,
Right.
And that's where we need to make sure, I mean, there must be somebody that's done this right somewhere. And I think what JR has come up with is a viable way to do it. I think maybe we ask them to finalize a little better. Perhaps are there homeowners organizations in all 4 projects?
No, I think the Sunrise Palms is the only one. They're a condo association, so.
Norte had CCNRs and very detailed. They never followed through. They have no governing body. Sunrise Palms is the only one.
Well, I think what needs to happen is there needs to be a concerted effort on the city's part to inform the residents what we're looking at here, so they all understand. Everybody gets an equal opportunity to get involved, especially on Sunrise Norte, because again, it would be that you do it or you don't. I mean, you're not forced to do it, to do the expansion. But I think you've solved the problem here, JR. It's just a matter of fine tuning it, and I guess you need to do whatever you need to do, but the residents do need to be involved, at least informed.
Well, it seems like council is in agreement and support of the staff recommendations, and that our public comment segment is closed.
Sunrise Palms, the resale restriction is, they're selling for less than what the city's doing, so that's a totally different waste of time.
So we would suggest that you go forward with the implementation and perhaps get back to us with a plan of implementation.
And I think obviously the critical component would be that we communicate with these, even if they don't have an association. You know, we could even send some correspondence to the particular properties that are subject to these restrictions, because obviously it's not all the properties. So we could refine this a little bit more, put it together into an explanation, and then communicate either through the association, if there is one, or directly with the property owners, saying that here's a proposal, and trying to solicit some reaction so that when we come back we can share that with you.
That sounds good. Okay, thank you for your staff report.
Thank you.
And with that, we will call this meeting adjourned.